So I've been informed by the town clerk that we have a quorum, so the meeting will now come to order. My name is Ron Hiss. I'm proud to be your town moderator. Welcome to town meeting for 2019. Will the members please stand and remain standing until requested to take a seat? We have with us tonight members of the Milton High School Mixed Chorus who will be singing our national anthem. Let me introduce you to the members of the Mixed Chorus. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you'll come up front. By the way, if you were watching Facebook, this was the group that sang the national anthem, or part of it, at Fenway Park, I think within the last week. So. If we have a standing vote, I'm going to ask them to come back. We'll take requests to fill in your time. Also, in keeping with our tradition, we'll start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. So please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing. The meeting will now open with an invocation by the Reverend Hall Kirkham of St. Michael's Church in Milton. I very much appreciate Reverend Kirkham taking some time from his busy schedule to join us. Sir.
Actually, Rabbi Fred Benjamin took it very much to heart this year, in particular when he was asked to give the invocation to Springtown meeting, and I'm taking his place. He is away at a rabbinic convention and asked that I share his thoughts, which will be followed by a prayer. The integration of a prayer by the Jewish community seeking the welfare of the government can be traced back to the time of Jeremiah, when Jews were sent into exile from the land of Israel to Babylonia. Later, during Roman times, the temple's deputy high priest taught, "Pray for the welfare of the government, since were it not for the fear of it, people would swallow each other up." In some ways, Rabbi Fred says, in some ways, fear of government still matters, at least when it comes to speeding tickets. But here in the United States, political power and leadership are meant to reflect a higher ideal. As Abraham Lincoln put it, a government that is of the people, by the people, and for the people. All the people. And so, with that as the charge and challenge given to you, friends and neighbors who have taken on the mantle of this profound responsibility, a blessing inspired from Jewish tradition. May the Spirit of life bless our country, its government, its leaders and advisors, and all who exercise just and rightful authority. May they administer all affairs of state fairly, so peace and security, happiness and prosperity justice, and freedom may abide in our midst. May citizens of all races and creeds forge a common bond in true harmony to banish all hatred and bigotry and to safeguard the ideals and free institutions that are the pride and glory of these United States. May this land be an influence for good throughout the world, uniting all people in peace and freedom and helping them to fulfill the vision of Micah, your prophet, that everyone shall sit under the grapevine or fig tree of their choice, and no one will make them afraid. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Kirkham. Briefly, I've also been informed by the town clerk that since our last meeting in February, we have not lost any former town meeting members or elected officials to her knowledge. So I think that's some good news. Now, will all town meeting members please remain standing in order that the town clerk, Ms. Galvin, if you could join us, will give you your oath of office. And again, please remain standing until requested to take a seat.
Okay, if you could raise your right hand and repeat after me. State your name. Do solemnly swear to faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all duties incumbent upon you as a town meeting member, to bear true faith and allegiance to and uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States of America, the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and the bylaws of the town of Milton, and to fairly and equitably execute the laws thereof within the extent of your authority and jurisdiction. So help you God. Thank you.
So if the veterans would have a seat, and would the new town meeting members please remain standing. At this point, I'd like to recognize the 33, I believe, Madam Clerk, new elected town meeting members here tonight. So I now want to recognize some elected officials who have, everyone can take a seat. Yes, thank you. Let me get this back up. Elected officials who have served with distinction for a number of years, including current and former. So James Henderson, Board of Assessors for 6 years. Kevin Chisholm, recently resigning his position, Park Commissioner for 8 years. Carrie McHugh, Library Trustee for 3 years. Stephen Freeman, Constable for 18 years. And Brian Furs, Planning Board Member for 5 years. And for town meeting members, for 10 years, we have Jean Boylan, Precinct 3, Thomas Caldwell, Precinct 6, Margaret Carrolls, Precinct 4, Janet Evans, Precinct 6, Earl Fay, Precinct 1, Harriet Manning, Precinct 4, Brenda McLaughlin, Precinct 3, Deborah Milbauer, Precinct 4, Lisa Murphy, Precinct 1. For 15 years, we have Edward Corcoran III, Precinct 3, Brian Kelly, Precinct 7, Diane Colligan, Precinct 8. For 20 years, we have Lee Carey, Precinct 3, Ted Daber, Precinct 5, Steve McCurdy, Precinct 7, Glenn Pavlicek, Precinct 10. For 30 years, we have Bernie Lynch in Precinct 6. And for 40 years, our grand prize winner, Marvin Gordon, in Precinct 8. So thank you all for your service. I'd like to just point out that our town council has served for 30 town meetings with us since 1989. This is his 30th annual town meeting with us, so thank you, Town Council Flynn. And Ms. Malley, Regina Malley, are you in the house? I think you had a brief. Yes, please. You want to come to the microphone and just make your brief statement?
Sure. So on behalf of the Park and Rec Department, I'm Regina Malley. I'm one of the park commissioners, and I'm a newly elected town meeting member for Precinct 8. I wanted to take a moment and thank Kevin Chisholm, as you mentioned, for his 8 years with the board, and also thank Dave Perdios, who was the director of the department for 23 years. Thank them for their service to the town, and also to welcome a new member of the board, Ted Carroll, who we look forward to working with. Thank you.
And now I'd like to recognize the Director of Veteran Affairs, Kevin Cook. Mr. Cook. You got to get elected to use this one.
Greetings. Thanks for the great turnout here. This is awesome. I wanted to make a couple quick announcements because I know you have a lot to do. First and foremost, I want to thank the town meeting for your continued support of the veterans of Milton and all the great work that you allow me to do in assisting those veterans. We have a large number of veterans who come to me seeking assistance for VA and other purposes, and of course Chapter 115 benefits. So that goes without saying. You're making a big difference in the lives of many veterans who seek help. On Saturday, we had a great turnout. We did Flags In at Milton Cemetery, a beautiful gem that is part of our town, and we had 50-plus volunteers show up, even though it looked like it was going to rain. And school kids, Cub Scouts, enthusiastic townspeople, and when you get 50-plus volunteers, you can knock out 2,500 flags in about 2.5 hours. So, and Lisa Ahern, our new cemetery director, great support job, and a large number of people. Richard Wells was there. Can't thank him enough for helping out, making sure that we honor our veterans with flags. Memorial Day ceremonies are in planning progress, and it will probably be very similar to what you've seen before. Starting at Town Hall at 9:30 on Memorial Day, a small ceremony there, and then a march down to the cemetery. We do have a special guest speaker this year. And it's always a challenge because it's like, who do we bring? Who do we bring? Natalie Foltz, well-known 100-year-old female World War II and Korea veteran will be our featured speaker. Now, I'm an old Navy man, and I made Petty Officer First Class, and if I'd stayed in probably a little longer, could have made Chief. Well, I looked through her records. Natalie, back in World War II, made Chief, but there was no room in her rate. In other words, there was no opening positions. So if there was, she would have been made a Chief back in World War II. An amazing accomplishment for a female veteran back when nobody was giving them the time of day. So awesome experience, and I'm going to be there to help and support her. So I'm looking forward to being there in support of Natalie Foltz in the town. And one final announcement. I'm one of the lucky guys. My office is at the COA. So unfortunately, like my boss, who's stuck at Town Hall and all the craziness there, I get to have fun with the COA people all day. And we have fun. There was a fashion show the other week. They're organizing a tour of my ship, USS Constitution, on June 12th for senior veterans of Milton. I've arranged this. The captain and the XO approved it. So we're going to have a private tour of the ship. And any Milton veteran who's 60 or older who wants to participate just needs to contact me, get me your name, and you can be there on June 12th when we tour the USS Constitution, the oldest commissioned war vessel in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. Having been advised by the town clerk that a majority of town meeting members are in attendance, I hereby declare that a quorum is present for the transaction of business. Before proceeding with the business of the meeting, however, there are certain preliminary matters to be taken up, and I've had one request that if you are aware of any game scores tonight, please keep them to yourself, because people are recording at home. So first, with permission, has been requested for certain members and personnel of the school committee, planning board, board of health, and other boards, committees, and departments who are not town meeting members to sit on the floor with other members of their respective boards, committees, and departments upon the understanding, of course, that they will not vote. Hearing no objection from the body, Such permission will be and hereby is accorded. Second, permission is granted to Milton Cablevision to televise these proceedings. Also, please note that there are 2 side aisle microphones, each with 3 seats at the front reserved for those waiting to be recognized to speak. I went through this with some of the new members last night, so again, if you do wish to speak, please come down to the row here in the front or the row over on that side in the front, and you'll be recognized. Third, I will now briefly review, particularly for the benefits of new town meeting members, some of the procedural rules for the conduct of the meeting, which, unless there is objection, will be the rules for the conduct of the meeting. First, town meeting members are required to check in with the town clerk and to be seated in the lower part of the auditorium. That's the part this side of the main aisle, which is demarcated and reserved for town meeting members. Town citizens and others who are not town meeting members are required to be seated in the upper part of the auditorium. Second, any town meeting member wishing to speak to any article or pending related matter will first go to the nearest mic, and upon being recognized by the moderator will identify himself by giving his or her name and precinct. If you have not been recognized by the moderator, you're not permitted to speak to the meeting. On occasion, members will informally alert the moderator that they desire to be recognized to speak on a certain article, and while your moderator will attempt to remember who desires to be recognized on any article, please be advised that the only way in which a member can be sure to be recognized is to go to the microphone and wait to be recognized. Third, by longstanding tradition, while any other registered voter of the town who is not a town meeting member may not vote here at town meeting, he or she may be recognized to address town meeting, providing that the voter in advance of the particular session has obtained permission from the moderator. There have been no citizens who have requested such permission tonight. Fourth, any person having a monetary or equitable interest in or who is employed as an attorney or otherwise by another person interested in any matter under discussion shall disclose the fact of his or her interest or employment before speaking thereon. Fifth, with reference to each article in the warrant, the recommendation of the warrant committee shall ordinarily be considered to have been presented in the form of a motion by the chairperson, which has been seconded by the secretary or other member of the warrant committee who is a town meeting member. Unless the moderator otherwise expressly states at the time, the question to be voted on under each article will usually be whether or not to accept the recommendation of the warrant committee. And for the new members, that's the bold text in your warrant. In other words, generally the recommendation of the warrant committee is the main motion pending under the article. In the event that the warrant committee recommends a no vote on an article, the question will be presented as a vote on a motion made and seconded to approve the article, i.e. members will vote yes if they favor the article and no if they oppose the article as recommended by the warrant committee. We have no articles in that form in this town meeting. 6, pursuant to Section 4 of Chapter 2 of the town's bylaws, the moderator requires that all substantive or complex motions be reduced to writing and presented to the moderator before submission to the meeting. You should find forms I think the town clerk has put up on the table. So if you wish to make an amendment, please take a few moments and write down exactly what you want to do so we can use the body's time wisely. 7th, by longstanding tradition, town meeting time, a handbook of parliamentary law, 3rd edition, which is this book right here. In addition to the bylaws of the town of Milton and the laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, be the rules of order for this meeting. 8th, any member desiring to show slides, make a PowerPoint presentation, or any other visual material before the meeting must make appropriate arrangements and inform the moderator. 9th, members are urged to obtain all information needed by them prior to the meeting. However, by tradition, the moderator will recognize any town meeting member for the purpose of requesting additional information relevant to the matter under consideration. All such requests must be directed solely to the moderator, who will attempt to ascertain the most appropriate official who should answer such an inquiry. Answers will not be provided while the member still has the floor in order to prevent the temptation to cross-examine the person providing the information, which is not permitted. However, the moderator will separately recognize a member once for the purpose of posing a follow-up question. Sometimes the information is not available or is not immediately available, and the request for information will simply not be fulfilled. 10th, when it is announced that by the moderator that the meeting will proceed to vote, debate will be closed and the pending question will be put to the town meeting. 11th, upon a question being put to the town meeting, the moderator will first determine by voice vote the sense of the meeting. If the moderator is unable to decide by the sound of the voices, or if his announcement of the vote is doubted by 7 town meeting members standing in their place, the moderator shall then proceed to have a standing vote on the question. If the vote is further doubted by 25 town meeting members standing in their places, then there will be a roll call of the meeting with the town clerk calling the name of each town meeting member in alphabetical order, and each town meeting member, upon his/her name being called, shall rise in place and answer yes or no. 12th, no vote shall be reconsidered at the same meeting, except upon a motion made within 1 hour of the adoption of such vote, unless by 2/3 vote, provided that the time which elapses during any adjournment of the meeting shall be excluded in computing the hour since the adoption of the vote. 13th, because of the constraints of state law pursuant to Proposition 2.5, the budget articles as recommended by the warrant committee to this town meeting are at the maximum tax levy limitation permitted by state law pursuant to Proposition 2.5. While the moderator will entertain motions to amend budget articles upward, the town's total appropriation may not exceed the Proposition 2.5 limit. Thus, to avoid potential chaos and the necessity for additional meetings to balance the town's appropriation within the levy limit on the amount of revenue that the town may raise by property tax, your moderator both urges and expects that any member offering an upward amendment to a budget article will also, for the benefit of fellow town meeting members, specify an offsetting decrease in some other line item or specify what additional source of revenue is or will be available. In addition, it is also permissible to make increased funding subject to an override ballot vote by the registered voters of the town. 14th, each person speaking to an article or amendment is limited to 10 minutes, and no person may speak on a question more than once when any other person desires to be heard, or more than twice on the same question without permission of the town moderator. Pre-approved presentations will not necessarily be limited to 10 minutes at the discretion of the moderator. I will do every effort to enforce that tonight. 15th, consent agenda rule. At least 5 business days prior to the opening of the first session of the annual town meeting or any special town meeting, the moderator may propose to all members a consent agenda, listing all the articles which, based on the records of recent town meetings, the moderator deems to be non-controversial. At the first session of the meeting, at the request of any 5 members present, any article shall be removed from the consent agenda so that it can be debated and voted upon in accordance with the provision of town meetings rules. A member requesting to remove an article from the consent agenda may state the reasons for the request without debate, but is not required to. All articles remaining in the consent agenda shall then be voted upon without debate with a 2/3 vote required for adoption. Hearing no objection, these will be the procedural rules for the meeting. Certain matters coming before the town meeting require a 2/3 vote in accordance with Chapter 448 of the Acts of 1996. I will entertain the following procedural motion, which allows the moderator to declare that a 2/3 majority vote has occurred. The motion is, on matters requiring a 2/3 vote by statute, account need not be taken unless the vote so declared is immediately questioned by 7 or more voters as provided in General Laws, Chapter 39, Section 15. Is there a second? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Thank you. I declare the motion is passed. Some observations of this meeting. This year we'll have several articles that will require a 2/3 vote. I will inform you of those before we vote on those motions. With that, I'd like to turn it over to a presentation by our chair of the warrant committee, Mr. George Asher.
Success. Bingo. Nope, that didn't do it. There you go. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. See if I can manage this. Oh, no, I didn't do that right. Oh, here we go. Let me back up. Oh, there we go. Okay. Oh, I blew that one. You know, you get a PhD from Harvard and you're still a moron when it comes to these things. There we go. Lynn, how do I reverse this back to the beginning? Okay. Now what do I do? Oh, that one. Oh, suggest. No, I didn't want to do that one. I want to fly them in because the other ones come in. Did I not do that right? Because I didn't want to have this one first. I had the other things come in. Okay, that's it. That's it. There you go. Okay. All right. I get it. So I'm pressing it around. Okay. I'm terribly sorry, but thank you very much for your patience. I wanted to start by talking a little bit about the town's finances, which generally speaking are not in bad shape today. We had an override 2 years ago. We've had several overrides over the course of 25 years. And one of the slides that I'm going to present to you will show that every now and then we kind of run up against the same problem that many families have when they discover that they have needs that they want to fund but need to go to Uncle Louie for the cash to do it. And the taxpayers are Uncle Louie and have been for many, many years. But that is a situation which is coming very close to ending in a not terrific way. The town revenues, if we go back to 2008, you can see that the general fund, which is our budget, which is everything that we spend as a general fund, has has increased by about 70%. And that's the green line that you see behind you. The property tax revenues have always been at a gap. There's been a gap between the property taxes that we raise from the levy as a result of 2.5 and other reasons, and the needs that the town has to fund these services which are essential for all of us. And that gap is growing wider. We'll see that in a little bit. Here we see as a component of the general budget, the dark green is other sources of funds that come in to the town, whether it's state or whether it's fees or whether it's gifts. But again, the property tax revenues still represent the lion's share of what the town is funding. And this year our appropriations were something close to $110 million. The initial budget that the Warrant Committee reviewed at the end of 2018 for fiscal year, 2018 for fiscal year beginning in June, was almost $111 million, and as many of you know, there was a significant budget deficit which we had to address. But the issue here is that the growth in property tax revenues is not going to keep pace with our general budget needs, and that problem is going to exacerbate over the next several years. This particular graph gives an idea and illustrates, I think, rather well what happens. This is the rate of change of the revenue and the general fund revenue, and the spikes that you see in the general property tax revenues are when we have had overrides. And since 1983, we have had 25 overrides, of which 16 have passed. Of those 16, 9 passed by fewer than 300 votes. It's actually kind of interesting when you look at it. The observations that you make from that are, in the first place, that we have certain issues that we are not going to be able to fund through general property taxes as we go forward and look at construction of the firehouses, the need to expand the school departments, classrooms based on the growth in the school-age population, and the need to look for alternative sources of revenue. Here we have payment in lieu of taxes. Payment in lieu of taxes is a program that is used in other municipalities. Generally speaking, you look at the fully taxable value of our large not-for-profits which are located here in town. We have the representation on the far right of Milton Academy, Curry College, and Beth Israel Deaconess, which are the 3 largest not-for-profits. Taxable, if they were fully taxable, there you can see what their tax bills would be. It comes something close to $9 million. $9 million added to what we have to pay in general budget, in addition to our property tax revenues, would be really terrific. Unfortunately, we don't get that, nor can we. The generally accepted valuation for payment in lieu of taxes is 25% of the tax that would be payable if it were a commercializable entity or a commercial entity. 25% of the taxes that would be paid by these 3 institutions alone would be close to $2 million. Again, $2 million would have solved the problem that we at the Warrant Committee faced, and the other departments, the chairman of the other departments and the select board and the school committee, in trying to close a $3 million budget deficit. That would have come in handy, and in fact probably would have solved us from making some of the decisions and recommendations that we excruciatingly had to make. What is actually happening, though, is the payment in lieu of taxes that we get is less than $1 million, of which only $100,000 has been paid to date. So I don't want to call our wonderful not-for-profit neighbors deadbeats, but the word does come to mind. So we have challenges that are looming for us here in town. I think we all know what they are. We talked a little bit about this, but again, I go back to our town's motto, Deus nobis haec otia fecit, God bestowed this peace upon us. Peace comes at a price. I think we as taxpayers pay it rather responsibly. I think we have to look at alternative sources in town to do just that. Milton, as a colonial town, grew up with its commercial spaces embedded in neighborhoods. We don't have large tracts of land where we could put up a Walmart or a large shopping center to generate, or a huge hotel to generate revenues. We just don't have it. And in fact, when we have had discussions in this very room to look at alternatives where we would place certain commercial entities in neighborhoods, we're kicking over a beehive. Nobody wants it in their neighborhood. And this is unfortunately what we face. So the recommendation that I have, that we as a warrant committee have discussed from time to time, is to look at alternative sources aggressively. We're really running out of time. I think if we go back to the taxpayers for another override similar to the one that we had a couple of years ago, I think I'd have my tire slashed and my house spray painted. I don't think this is anything that any of us really wants to look at. I think we really have to start looking at alternatives in a very aggressive way, and to see that we, the town, are beginning to realize value from the investment that we have made, that we make possible through our tax dollars and through our support of the institutions in town, which once upon a time really did serve the townspeople far more than they do today. There's an equity issue here. There is a finance issue that we have to address. And I think that generally speaking, it's time for us to say, give us a hand. We're happy to help you, but one hand helps the other. Thank you very much, and good luck this evening.
Just a note, Congressman Lynch was able to stop by tonight. He doesn't have any particular prepared remarks, but he did want to make sure you knew he was here. So Congressman Lynch would just like to stand and be recognized by the body. Thank you for coming to town meeting. The first item then is, per a recent bylaw change, the chairman of the, or rather chair of the audit committee needs to come to report to town meeting annually. So we'll recognize Kathy White, chair of the audit committee.
Hi, good evening. I'm Kathy White. We'll get the slides up and moving shortly. I'd like to thank our current audit committee members, Brian Burns, Carolyn Ferguson, Michael Sutphin, and Chris Trackus for their service this year. As you know, we are required to report annually to the town meeting on the compliance of the town with respect to management letter comments. In addition to providing an opinion on our financial statements, our outside auditors do annually provide a management letter with suggestions for improving our controls and operational efficiency. Yeah, next one is great. Yep, next one, thank you. So this year, the good news is the amount of management letter comments has been dwindling over the years. There are 6 to briefly talk about this year, and they are getting resolved. So that is excellent progress. This year there were 2 items that were issued in the commented upon in the prior years that had been resolved by the end of the prior fiscal year, June 30 of 2018. We're a little bit in arrears by the time we get to report to town meeting. So 2 things that have been resolved that the auditors had commented on, that the centralization of the procurement process was completed, and we anecdotally commented on that last year, but that was confirmed. And then there was another comment, which is good that it has been resolved, that there was an issue with respect to record retention in the retirement office and making sure all the paperwork was in place as people were getting hired. And so that process had also been cleaned up for all new hires and more recent folks, and it's likely to be a little bit of continued historic cleanup, and we'll continue to inquire about it, but it was in good shape. There are 2 items that are in process this year. One is with respect to the purchase order system. Many of the departments, the majority of them are online, and again, this is as of June 30 of 18, so we'll hear the June of 19 report soon. But there's certainly lots of progress that's been made and a lot of adoption of the order system, purchase order system. The other item that is significantly in process is is in the school department, the required audit of student activity funds, which have been done internally, and an outside auditor has been hired for that purpose and will be expected to be complete by the end of fiscal year 19. There are two items that are still open. One is related to the reconciliations in the treasurer's office, and that one has sort of lingered, gone up and down over the years, never consistently the same issue year after year. And so at the recommendation of the audit committee this year, we recommended to the board of the select board in the winter that the town hire some help to get this done and resolved and not let it linger anymore. So that has happened. Powers & Sullivan, our outside audit firm, could also do some agreed upon procedures and look at the cash reconciliation process and just bring this to closure. So that the procedures have been done, the comments and recommendations have been done. The audit committee will meet with the treasurer, the town administrator, and coordination with the town accountant is needed. But we expect to do that this spring, and hopefully this is resolved by the time we report again next year, and by the time that June of 19. But that is in process, and we thought that instead of things lingering, to get some resolution, and outside help is needed. The last item is with respect to the documentation of internal controls. This is documentation exercise that can be a little bit of an undertaking. This is primarily related to schools as it's required for federal funds purposes, but that is an open item, and our outside auditors have been gracious enough to provide, intended to provide some samples to us, and so they can get us moving on those requirements. So those are resolved, in process, and still open items for the year. And then it's our report to town meeting.
Any questions for Ms. White? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Or is that Mr. Walker? Yes, you have a question.
Leroy Walker, town meeting member, Precinct 10. Would the audit committee consider reporting at the fall town meeting as well? A number of these items seem to be pretty time sensitive and pretty important, and some might be resolved well before next year's annual town meeting.
Yeah, no, would be certainly willing to. I think the timing of the annual audit is usually, maybe we can push them to get it completed by that point. They
Right.
come and do their work in the summertime, and then usually don't finalize the report until the fall. So
Okay,
maybe
thank
we
you.
can push that schedule along. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. White. We'll now proceed to the consent agenda. I'll just describe the process since this is our second time doing it. I'll start with entertaining a motion to adopt the consent agenda. Look for a second. Then I'll read through. Yes, okay. I heard made and seconded. I will then read through the individual items. Again, any 5 members may raise their hand. You can explain why or not. If I see 5, we'll withdraw it from the consent agenda. At the end of the whole list, I'll reconfirm which items remain and then call for a vote. It'll require a 2/3 vote. So number 1, here report of the town officers submitted by the select board recommend that the town vote to accept the report of the town accountant. Okay. Number 2, authorize the treasurer to collect taxes submitted by select board recommended that the town vote yes. Okay. Number 3, authorize treasurer to enter into compensating balance agreements. This is number 3, select board recommended that the town vote yes. It's accepted. Okay. Number 7, audit appropriation submitted by the select board recommended that the town take affirmative action on Article 7 as printed in the warrant. That's accepted. Number 8, union wage set aside submitted by the select board recommended that the town take affirmative action on Article 8 as printed in the warrant. Accepted. Number 11, Chapter 13, position classification and wage increases submitted by the personnel board recommended that the town take affirmative action on Article 11 as printed in the warrant. Accepted. Okay. You may see in the draft there was a change in the last 4 days or so. We withdrew item number 15 since there'll be just some discussion on that tonight. So I'll move to number 16. The Water Enterprise Fund appropriation submitted by the select board recommended that the town take affirmative action on Article 16 as printed in the warrant. I see 1, 2, 3, 4. Is there a 1? 5, okay. We will withdraw number 16. Number 17, Sewer Enterprise Fund Appropriations Select Board. Recommend the town take affirmative action on Article 17 as printed in the warrant. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. Okay, we'll draw number 17. Number 19, Chapter 90 Appropriations Select Board. Recommended that the town take affirmative action as printed on Article 19 as printed in the warrant. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we'll withdraw 19. Number 21. By the way, I'll be expecting you to come talk to us when we get to those articles. We look forward to hearing your points. Number 21, appropriation for rehabilitation of town stormwater systems submitted by the Select Board. Recommended that the town take affirmative action on Article 21 as printed in the warrant. You see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we'll withdraw number 21. 22, appropriation for sewer system improvements submitted by the Select Board. Recommended that the town take affirmative action on Article 22 as printed in the warrant. That looks okay. 25, cemetery appropriation. Board of Cemetery Trustees recommended that the town take affirmative action on Article 25. That's 1, 2, 3, 5. Okay, we have 5. We'll withdraw number 25. Number 26, Park Department Appropriations Select Board recommend the town take affirmative action on Article 26 as printed. See 1, 2, 3. Did I just see 2? 3, 4, 5. Okay, we'll withdraw 26. Number 30, Consolidated Facilities Department Select Board recommended that the town take affirmative action on Article 30 as printed in the warrant. See 1, but it looks 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's all I see. 4. I feel like an auctioneer. Do I have 5? Do I have 5? Sold. Okay, we'll withdraw 30. Number 33, other post-employment benefit trust appropriation. Select Board recommended that the town take affirmative action on Article 33 as printed in the warrant. See 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5's over there. 5's over there. Okay. 33 and number 34. There is a. Nope. Number 34, reserve fund appropriation submitted by the Select Board. Recommend that the town take affirmative action on Article 34 as printed in the warrant. And that is okay. So, what I have is those that are remaining in the consent agenda are Articles 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 11, 22, 34. I'll say it again. Remaining in the consent agenda are 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 11, 22, 34. All in favor of approving the consent agenda as modified, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. I declare a unanimous vote. Thank you. With that, we will proceed to Article 4 on page 15 of your warrant. To see if the town will vote to discharge the legislative committee established pursuant to the vote of the 1988 annual town meeting under Article 7, and to act on anything related thereto, submitted by the Select Board, recommended that the town vote yes. Does anyone wish to speak to this article? Seeing none, all in favor of Article 4, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. We will go to Article 5. Article 5, it's a lengthy article. It's just recommended that the town appropriate the sum of $3,137,152 to fund the capital projects listed below. I will waive reading all of the details. And that to meet said appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Select Board, is authorized to sell and issue bonds or notes of the town aggregating not more than $1,699,088 in principal amount pursuant to the provisions of Chapter 44, Section 7 of the Massachusetts General Laws, as amended, or any other applicable law for the purposes listed under the heading bonded capital items, including the payment of costs incidental or related thereto, and that in accordance with Chapter 44, Section 20 of the General Laws, the premium received by the town upon the sale of any bonds or notes thereunder, less any such premium applied to the payment of the cost of issuance of such bonds or notes may be applied to pay project costs, and the amount borrowed for each such project shall be reduced by the amount of any such premium so applied. And that the Select Board be and hereby is authorized to accept and expend, in addition to the foregoing appropriation, one or more grants or gifts from any other public or private funding source, and that the sum of $484,500 be appropriated from funds certified by the Department of Revenue as free cash, and that $175,000 be transferred from the DBW Capital Projects Fund related to the Recycle Toter project, and that $592,051 be appropriated from the August 2018 General Fund Bond Premium, $92,369 be appropriated from the August 2018 Water Enterprise Fund Bond Premium, and $94,144 be appropriated from the August 2018 Sewer Enterprise Fund Bond Premium, all for the purposes listed under the heading non-bonded capital items, including the payment of costs incidental and related thereto. Does anyone wish to speak to this article? Yes, sir.
Richard Howell, town meeting member, precinct 3. What's the story with trash barrels?
Okay, we will recognize, since this was submitted by the the Capital Improvement Committee and the Select Board, is Mr. Hurley the chair? Or is that Mr. Denny? Is that you? Mr. Denny.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you for the question, Mr. Howe. There's been a lot of confusion about the trash barrels. The program was started on April 22nd. There was an opportunity for residents to come to Town Hall and file for an opt-out. Essentially, the plan is going to be the third week of June. Trash barrels will be rolled out to all of the residents in town, very similar to the way the recycle barrels were rolled out. To date, we've had approximately 450 people opt out. Other communities that have represented this previously have seen anywhere from 5 to 10% of the population opt out of this. This is exclusively to replace the annual sticker, and that's all it's going to do. The barrels will arrive the third week in June. You'll receive a bill sometime in July, equivalent to what the annual sticker has been, which is $156. The caveat with that is if the abatement process, of which 150 people had filed for an abatement, if you can prove 65 or older, by July 1st, that $156 becomes $94. And weekly stickers will still be available. Any overflow from the barrel would require a $3 sticker. Any bulk items or any other items that require stickers, the weekly stickers will still be available. But that's essentially the trash barrel rollout. Okay. Mr. Sheffield.
Folks, if I could ask a favor, no one can hear you unless you come to the mic. If you could, they can't hear your question.
Mr. Sheffield's question was, what about two-family homes?
Thank you for saving him the trip.
Yeah.
Okay.
So two-family homes will receive 2 barrels unless you opt out. And that bill will be sent to the landlord. The landlord is responsible for the $156 per barrel.
Can you come to the mic, folks? That's our process here, if you would. If you have a question now and want to come down, please start making your way down.
Margaret McAvini, town meeting member, precinct 3, former warrant committee member. Are you sending out notices to all the residents? I've spoken with a lot of elderly residents in my precinct. A lot of them are poor. They have rabbit eyes. They have channel 457. They don't subscribe to the paper, and it's going to be pretty sad that they're going to be opted into something that they knew nothing about. And I guess I'm a little bit worried about the legality of including every single citizen without their knowledge.
Mr. Dennehy?
We have reached out through multimedia outlets. I believe the Milton Times has reported on it for the last 3 weeks. Patriot Ledger has not run a story on it. We had a session at the Council on Aging. The Council on Aging Director, Mary Ann Sullivan, has been advocating this program to people, the pros and cons of it. It's been on the town's website since it was announced. We've been trying to reach out as best we can. The majority of communities that roll these barrels out do it as an opt-out program.
Excuse me, ma'am. Ma'am, we can't hear you.
as I was trying to state, there are a lot of elderly people that don't have the internet. They're not reaching out to the media, the newspaper. They have 4, 5, and 7. Wouldn't it be nice to mail out this type of information? It's the same thing you're doing with the electricity. Everyone's opted in. A lot of people don't know this stuff.
Thank you, Ms. McAvaney. DPW Director Berkeley just informed me that a mailing will be going out to all the residents in May. And you have until June 1st to opt out. I neglected to say that earlier, but that's correct. Yep, abatements. We'll accept abatements, up till after the trash barrel is delivered, if you can provide proper identification about your age.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak to Article 5? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Ellen Denoyer, Precinct 2. I just had a question, which is the pump station replacement for $300,000. I was curious which pump station, where it's located.
Mr. Berkeley?
Hi, everyone. Chase Berkeley, Director of Public Works. So that is for the Hillside Pump Station. It's currently being designed, and that is the funding for the remaining cost for construction. There was also an article last year that funded the first half of that expense.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak to this article? Seeing none, this requires a 2/3 vote. All in favor of Article 5, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. Article 6, recommended that the town vote to rescind the authorized but unissued balance of the amounts authorized to be borrowed to pay costs of the following projects, which include sewer, rescinded $28,000, Article 21, sewer, $218,250, Article 5, fire building improvements repair, $145,000, Article 5, construction DPW cemetery locker rooms garage, $2,404. Article 6, sewer mechanical rotting machine, $18,000. Article 22, sewer, $685,500. Article 5, school science wing roof replacement and new genie lift, $54,000. Article 28, sewer for $685,500. Does anyone wish to speak to this article? Seeing none, all in favor of Article 6, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. Article 7 was approved by the consent agenda. Article 8 was approved by the consent agenda. Article 9, recommended that the town appropriate the amount shown in the following tabulations under the heading recommended FY20. Under employee benefits, contributory retirement, $6,613,088. Under group insurance, $12,884,913. Total employee benefits, $19,498,001, and that to meet said appropriation, the sum of $19,101,811 be raised from the tax levy, and the sum of $396,190 be appropriated from funds certified by the Department of Revenue as free cash. Does anyone wish to speak to this article? Sir, are you coming to the front? Nope. All in favor of Article 9, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. Article 10, recommended that the town appropriate the amount shown in the following tabulation under the heading recommended FY20. Unemployment, recommended $100,000, and that to meet said appropriation, the sum of $100,000 be raised from the tax levy. Does anyone wish to speak to this article? Seeing none, all in favor of Article 10, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. Article 11, which is a lengthy article. Move to waive the reading. All in favor, say aye. Is so moved. So, anyone wish to speak to? Was Article 11 in the consent agenda? Pardon me. I'm trying to keep up. There we are. Consent. All right. Article 11. We go to Article 12. Article 12. Public safety. Recommended that the town appropriate the amount shown in the following tabulation under the heading recommended FY20. Inspectional services total $504,626. Total fire $5,667,273. Total Milton Emergency Management, $10,935. Total Police, $7,446,268. Total Public Safety, $13,629,102. And that to meet said appropriation for leash law enforcement, the sum of $1,400 be transferred from the dog licenses surcharge account. Who knew we had such a thing? Received pursuant to Chapter 187 of the Acts of 1981, and that the balance of $13,627,702 be raised from the tax levy. Does anyone wish to speak to this article? Mr. Collins.
Webster Collins. I'm a town meeting member of Precinct 9. I'm a member of the Fire Station Building Committee. And the reason I wanted to speak on this article is because of what I've been working on for quite some time. A donation, major gift to the town, which unfortunately has failed. And because it's been very open and transparent and public, I want to read two brief emails and then present a recommendation for a town meeting to think about, a very positive one. I learned on the 26th of April that I was not going to be successful. I sent to Brian Walsh, our chairman, the following email. I have received a response from the chairman of the foundation with whom I have been working over the past 15 months. At our April 10, 2019 Fire Station Building Committee meeting, I reported that $800,000 to $1 million had been earmarked by the foundation for equipment donation to the town for its headquarters building. A member of the foundation's board of trustees lives in the town of Milton. Unfortunately, I've received the following response. It's not a very pleasant one. I would prefer not to give a dime to the town in the way of philanthropy. The response then took the town to task on the whole issue of what was talked about by our warrant committee chairman of the difficulties with town finances. After the response, the chairman of the fund said, I agree. The Fire Station Building Committee has worked hard and in complete full transparency to try to obtain this donation and talk of other donations for the town. This has been discussed at multiple public meetings, forums, as a way to substantially contribute to the costs that were discussed by the chairman of the warrant committee. I'm ad-libbing a little bit. I hope everyone will agree. This was a very difficult and serious email that I received. And what made me what was particularly bothersome to me is I'm going to read from a second email that I sent to Mike, not the whole thing. But this was from a person whose income is in the top 1% of the entire income in the town of Milton. It's not your typical citizen grumble. It's a real serious major complaint. And really, it really bothered me on this whole thing. And what I am thinking of is the following. And I put a little note in. If the town can show the same resolve as the Suffolk resolves, I see a way to turn this around with foresight, vision as part of leadership. And what I mean is this. If we were to take of our free cash, $1 million of it, and show good faith and set it aside, earmarked for the Fire Station Building Committee rather than being an expense, then I would go back and try to get $1 million matching from the foundation to really work towards the benefit. And the reason I say that is as follows, and I want to put in one other thought here in this email. I'm going to ad-lib it a little bit because I can't find it. And that's basically that what we're trying to do is use a matching gift to then go to others of major means and try to get a matching gift from those foundations. In other words, the whole idea is to steamroll this gift idea program and really bring something forth before the town to really benefit the town in terms of some major amounts of money. So basically, I defer to our moderator, but I'd like to put the motion on the floor that we reserve $1 million of free cash, and I'll read what I had written to see if I could then use this to bring in money for the town. Earmark $1 million in free fiscal 2020 cash toward construction of the new headquarters station if a matching gift of $1 million is received.
So, Mr. Collins, I think as we spoke earlier, I think the approach we had discussed would be to, rather than bring an amendment to the floor, which would require changing possibly many different budget articles. You're not proposing that tonight.
No, I'm not.
You're more expressing the sentiment of yourself and the Fire Building Committee to encourage our town officials to seek to retain $1 million of free cash during the course of FY20 for use by the Fire
Correct.
Building Committee.
Correct.
You're expressing a sentiment. Okay, thank you.
That's right.
So thank you, Mr. Collins. So
That's the motion. If it.
Well,
but I have to rely on you how it should be treated. It might not need a motion.
why don't we have a sidebar for a second, and we'll talk
Great.
amongst ourselves for a few minutes.
I'm going to defer to the chairman of the select board, who is going to use better words than I can provide at this particular moment.
Mr. Wells, Chair of the Select Board, you're recognized.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. First off, I want to thank Mr. Collins for all his hard work. I've sat through several of these meetings, and like my colleagues, we've been privy to all the emails. He's worked very hard to try and bring this gift in. But if you look into the comments, we've already accomplished half of that. We've parked $500,000 into a special account just for unforeseen expense, or what will be part of the fire station building. So half of that has already been done. Even though we can't predict what free cash will be next year, but what we could try to do is the same thing, put another $500,000 away next year, which would mean we've put away $1 million, which would allow Mr. Collins to then go make his efforts on trying to get a matching $1 million. So if you read right down the comments, it's marked right through, and the money is in that. It's in on the recommendation on 610. It's 500,000. That's $610,000. Article 32. And you can see down in the comments, and I'll read it to you if you'd like. Does anyone want me to read it? Are you all right? What page? Page 48.
Yes, hang on, Mr. So your request is to defer the reading of Article 32 until 32?
So if you like, you want me to come back and readdress this under Article 32? Is that all right? All right, I'll get my thoughts on order, and I'll be ready to go for Article 32. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wells. Does anyone else wish to speak to Article 12? All in favor of Article 12, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. Article 13. Article 13 is one of a number that have been affected by the green sheet that you should have received up on the table as you walked in. Does everyone have this green sheet? For printing purposes, it ends up addressing a number of different articles that are in the warrant tonight. These have been adopted or recommended by the school committee, recommended by the select board, and approved by the warrant committee, I'm informed. Is that correct, Mr. Wells? You'd like to speak to this for a moment?
I've talked enough. No, I'd like to ask Elaine Craighead and my colleagues, Katie Connor, who are the co-chairs of the Finance Committee, to address this issue.
Okay, I'll bring them up in a second. Let me just make sure the audience understands what they're voting on. Do we have the article up on the screen? The revised one is up there. So if you should look at your Article 13, if you look on page 30 of your warrant, the first one is under the third bullet point that says law. The first sub-bullet says retainer. That number has been changed to $65,000. If you look at the second bullet under law, professional and special services, the recommended amount has been changed to $300,000. And those are the two changes recommended by and approved by the warrant committee for tonight. So with that, I'll just summarize. Recommended that the town appropriate the amount shown in the following tabulation under the heading recommended FY20. Accounting, $338,961. Insurance general, $1,137,052. I can't read have you retotaled on total law up there? Since the numbers have changed? They offset. $397,500. Information technology, $521,056. Town reports, $27,950. Total select board, $753,043. Veterans benefits, $124,282. Total select board, $3,299,844. Board of Assessors, $282,411. Town clerk, $339,208. Election and registration, $90,131. Treasurer collector, $398,585. Total general government, $4.410179, and that to meet said appropriation, the sum of $4,410,179 be raised from the tax levy. Now, we'll recognize let's start with Ms. Craighead. Is that from the school committee to explain? And Ms. Conlon as well. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Elaine Craighead, and I am the new vice chair of the school committee. And the woman to my left is...
And I'm Katie Conlon. I'm the chair of the Select Board's Finance Committee, working with my colleague Melinda Collins and our town administrator Michael Dennehy and Amy Dexter, our town accountant.
For the first time ever, because the select board, for the first time ever, because it has 5 members, was able to form a finance subcommittee without breaking the open meeting law. If more than 2 people would have been more than half. Anyway, so this was the first time that we were able to work together to figure out how to make it all work. And I have to say that Katie was instrumental in making this go, and we have her to thank for more money in the school's pocket and distributed around people who need it.
Well, that's very kind, Elaine, but we have a lot of people to thank, including the chair of the planning board, Cheryl Tagayas, the school superintendent, the assistant superintendent, and the members of our finance committee that I just mentioned. So we want to thank the school finance subcommittee for working closely with us this year. Mr. Moderator, could we, the changes that are on the front page of the green sheet are related to a lot of articles. Could we just summarize what we're proposing, not for just for Article 13, but for the others as well?
So you're not making a motion to adopt future articles. You are just describing the context of this overall approach.
Yes.
Yes, approved. Thank you.
Let me take that.
Yeah.
Okay. So in a nutshell, what we're proposing on the front page of the green sheet that everyone received, there's a table and there's some bullet points at the top that explain some changes we're proposing, and I understand the Warrant Committee has voted to support tonight. And our full board and I think the full school committee voted to support these changes as well. So the first change that we're making, after the warrant went to print, we received some additional state aid in the form of the House budget, and that was about $97,000. So we're proposing under Article 15 to appropriate that to the Department of Public Works because of our increased solid waste and recycling costs that you probably will hear more about later this evening. We're also proposing, we also went back and looked at a few budgets, and we focused on the law budget and the Master Plan Implementation Committee's budgets. And our town council graciously agreed to hold the retainer at the current year's appropriation rather than the increase that we had been initially proposing. So we're proposing under Article 13 to reduce the law retainer by $10,000 and hold it level at the current year's amount of $65,000. And we're also proposing to reduce the law special services account by $15,000 and again hold it current with the fiscal 19 amount because the law bills vary from year to year. And if we go over the amount budgeted, we can tap the reserve fund to pay the additional law bills as an unforeseen expense. Otherwise, we're going to trap the money in the law special services and it's stuck there for most of the year until the end. We also, under Article 14, looked at the Master Plan Implementation Committee's budget. Initially, the MPIC was being appropriated $150,000 for both a townwide traffic model and study, and $10,000 of that was for a bicycle master plan. We're proposing to reduce that to $85,000. And we're keeping the $10,000 for the bicycle and master plan, but we're reducing the amount for the for the townwide traffic study to just cover the first phase, which was $60,000 to put together the traffic model, which will be beneficial not only to the MPIC and the Planning Board, but also the Traffic Commission and our new Traffic Mitigation Committee, which received these numbers today and was on board with making the change. It would also fund a portion of Phase 2, which is some alternative analyses. There was also $50,000 budgeted in the warrant for the master plan just for implementation work studies that the MPIC would be working on. In consultation over the weekend with the chair of the Planning Board, whose budget for studies had been reduced by $50,000 to $15,000, we thought really the Planning Board is the primary planning agency in town, and it's the elected board rather than the MPIC, and that the East Milton zoning, and although our green sheet on the second page refers to 40R zoning, I understand from the chair of the Planning Board it's broader than that. It's any zoning for East Milton that is under consideration. So we're proposing to reduce the MPIC. The net change is to have $30,000 for the Master Plan Implementation Committee for its studies and $50,000 for the Planning Board, largely for the East Milton zoning work that they're going to be doing. The Master Plan Implementation Committee could use its $30,000 for a number of things that the MPIC is working on or would like to work on in FY20, which includes design guidelines, possibly housing initiatives, some ongoing work at Milton Village or the Milton Landing, as well as possibly using the money to supplement the traffic study. So those changes, that's a net change. It's a little bit confusing on the handouts. They're a little bit complicated, I should say, because we're doing some internal transfers because we want to redirect recurring operating revenue from the tax levy out of the MPIC budget and into the school budget to fund the school costs and fund the MPIC solely out of one-time money. In this case, it's not free cash. It's the money that's left over from the Hendry's Building MBTA cost, the diversion fund, because the town had incurred the obligation to pay the diversion cost for the MBTA. We had money set aside. We have money coming back. We did not need to spend all that we had budgeted for that. So that's also the source under Article 37 of putting some of that one-time money into the Affordable Housing Trust. And rather than have zero, we're recommending $15,000. As a result of the changes to the law budget in the MPIC, we're also able to recommend under Article 24, $20,000 to supplement the library budget, which would allow the library to remain open on Sundays, or most Sundays. So I think in a nutshell, those are the changes, but we think the net result being able to increase the library and the school budgets and make the right appropriation between the planning board and the master plan implementation committee and delay over possibly 2 years the ongoing traffic study makes sense, and we hope that you'll support it. And again, I want to thank the school department, the school committee, and the superintendent and the assistant superintendent for all of their work with our committee. Thank you.
It was pointed out that I read the wrong total on this article. The total general government recommended FY20 is $4,385,179. Yes, Ms. You're all set. Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak to this article? Mr. Chinman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Michael Chinman, Precinct 2. I'm looking at the highly compensated salaries of some of the town officials, and I see that, for example, the town administrator, who I would say that's a highly compensated salary, holds steady from FY18, FY19 through FY20. But the town clerk and the town treasurer both have the same substantial salary with a 2% increase between each of those fiscal years. And I see other salaries, not nearly as substantial, are holding steady or even going down. The Council on Aging salary and wages goes down. I'm sure there's a reason for that. But my point is, I think the report from the warrant committee at the beginning of the warrant talks about our fiscal dire straits. Some of the salaries are holding steady, some of them are going up. I move that instead of a 2% increase on the treasurer and town clerk salaries, that FY20 stay at the FY19 level.
So can I make sure we have that just clear for the audience? So you are saying which two salaries again?
The treasurer and the town clerk.
Okay, so so if we could get this specifically, so treasurer is on page, let's start with town clerk. So salary clerk, you're recommending instead of $98,760, that be $96,843?
Correct.
And you're recommending on subsection E, salary treasurer, to change the recommended amount to $96,843?
Correct.
Understood. Is there a second? Okay, we now have a motion to amend that's been made and seconded. Does anyone wish to speak to this motion to amend? Is it, by the way, is it clear what the recommended motion is for everyone? I'll repeat it again. So if you look on your green sheet, the second page of Article 13, paragraph C, town clerk, the salary clerk would now read under the recommended amount in the right-hand column, $96,843. If you go down to E, treasurer collector, below that it says salary treasurer, that amount would go to $96,843. Anyone wish to speak to this article? Yes, sir, Mr. Fahey.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sean Fahey, Precinct 9. I certainly see the same data that we all see here with budget constraints that we have, but there's something about this that strikes me as a little unfair to target two salaries that happen to be visible to us with the number of employees we have in the town. I think if we're going to look at salaries, it should be an across the board and not select two, as I said, just because it's visible.
Mr. Walker?
Roy Walker, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 10. I would echo those comments. I think if we, going forward, if we'd like to say that we, as a cost-saving measure, would freeze salaries across the town, bargaining unit and non-bargaining unit employees combined, I think that's fine. And I understand the spirit of the motion, but to single out two individuals, both of whom work hard every day, and certainly didn't anticipate this, I think would be unfair. So I'm not in favor of this motion.
Ms. Galvin, you're recognized.
So I too stand in opposition to this, and I, you know, the entire town gets 2%. I certainly feel like I put in my fair share, as does Mr. McAuliffe, and I echo Mr. Walker's and Mr. Fahey's sentiments. Thank you.
Ms. Agostino, you recognized.
Diane DiTullio, Agostino, Precinct 9. I give our town clerk a lot of credit for standing up and making that statement. I feel so guilty if something dawns on me that I might need an answer to at night or on the weekend, emailing her, because she always responds 7 days a week, no matter what hour of the day or night. So I now save it in my draft folder before I send it to her. And while the motion did get seconded, I was concerned that it might just go through, and I feel that we don't want to sit here tonight and get a full explanation, but an appointed position such as the town administrator and a negotiated contract and maybe additional benefits versus an elected official with a set salary, you know, I don't know if we want to sit here, but if we really are seriously considering removing that 2% from these two elected positions, I would want a full explanation from either the personnel board or someone has to, you know, all those other things that we may not see or know about. So I'd strongly recommend for the time being to do a no vote, and we could take it up again next year. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak to this motion to amend? Yes, Mr. Wells.
I'm back. Just a point of order. I believe Mr. Dennehy's salary was included in Article 11, which was passed to the consent agenda. Follow up to Mrs. Agostino's comments. It's true, Mr. Dennehy is a contractual employee, and both the clerk and the treasurer are treated as our Chapter 13 employees. That's how they receive their raise, using the same formula. Chapter 13 is anyone who's not in a bargaining unit or not in a contract. They're both elected, and so they receive a annual raise similar to what the Chapter 13 employees would receive. That's how the decision is made. I hope that answers that question. Thank you.
Does the select board have an opinion on the motion to amend?
We would oppose the motion.
Warrant committee, an opinion?
George Asher, Chair of the Warrant Committee, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 6. The Warrant Committee unanimously rejects the motion. And once again, I will step out of my role and to present to the town meeting, this is the wrong way to go about looking at controlling costs. I will echo Diane D'Agostino's comment. Anytime we have needed information or help, the town administrator, the town treasurer, the Susan Galvin have been tremendous. Amy Dexter have been tremendous in their execution of their responsibilities. That is not the fight. Nickel and diming is not going to get us where we have to go. There are other ways that we can effectively govern the town and not grind the public officials who are executing their job beautifully from our perspective.
I'll call for a vote on the motion to amend. All in favor of voting the motion to amend, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The motion fails. We're back to Article 13. Does anyone else wish to speak to Article 13? Seeing none, all in favor of Article 13, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. Article 14 is also in your green sheet. Do we have the revised Article 14 up? We do? Not yet, okay. Recommended that the town appropriate the amount shown in the following tabulation under the heading recommended FY20. Conservation Commission, 2,500. Council on Aging, 297,658. Historical Commission, 2,240. Personnel Board, 58,211. Planning Board, this is your change. You see Studies has been changed to 50,000. Planning Board has changed to 86,187. Master Plan Implementation Committee changed to 30,000, and Traffic Bicycle Master Plan to 85,000. The total MPIC, 115,000. Warrant Committee, 10,066. Total Boards and Committee, 571,862. And that, to meet said appropriation, the sum of $421,862 be raised from the tax levy, and then the sum of $150,000 be appropriated from the Hendry's Building Demolition Fund, provided that the appropriation for the Master Plan Implementation Committee may be expended only with the approval of the Planning Board and the Select Board. Does anyone wish to speak to this article? Yes, Mr. Whiteside.
I have a motion to amend, and I wrote it before I got the green sheet, so I had to revise it. But it's in writing.
Thank you.
So the motion is this: strike the recommended appropriation for Master Plan implementation to the Master Plan Implementation Committee and substitute the following. Master Plan implementation, $15,000. This would be in addition to the, it's a reduction from $30,000 to $15,000. But it's in addition to the traffic and bicycle master plan of $60,000. So the next change would be strike the total and substitute total master plan implementation committee, $100,000. The next change would be to strike the proposed appropriation of $50,000 to the planning board for studies and reduce the planning board total. And then the final would be to substitute the following for the final phrase. And it would say this: and that the above specified traffic master plan shall be designed and developed in collaboration with the Traffic Commission, the Traffic Mitigation Committee, and the Planning Board, one of which shall be the lead agency in soliciting public input and in making decisions and choices with respect to the use of the model. And then the second paragraph in that final phrase, and that to meet said appropriation, the sum of $371,862 be raised from the tax levy, and that the sum of $150,000 be appropriated from the Hendry's Building Demolition Fund. The net effect would be a savings of $65,000. And I have some comments.
Yes, please.
Oh, I guess I need to...
We should get a... Is it clear what Mr. Whiteside is saying? Tell you what, are you trying to type this up, Ms. Hoy? Okay, and then we'll see if there's a second before anyone seconds something they don't understand. You want to just confer with Ms. Hoy for a minute?
So I'm going to change my motion because we need to get out of here sometime. And the motion would be to strike the $50,000 appropriation to the Planning Board for studies.
That's okay. Thank you. So, Mr. Whiteside, is that clear? There's only one change. You see the 50,000 that's in red under E says studies. That goes to zero.
Yes.
Thus, the total planning board would go to 36,187. That's the only change Mr. Whiteside is making a motion to amend. Is there a second? There's a second. Mr. Whiteside, please carry on with your description.
Apart from the traffic master plan, the most expensive planning request appears to be a proposed expenditure of $50,000, which I am told is for a consultant to advise on possible use of so-called 40R zoning to create high density, which means at least 20 units per acre, overlay districts in Milton Village and East Milton. The 40R program is a state-sponsored affordable housing program. It is sometimes used for housing projects which might otherwise be developed under General Laws Chapter 40B. Housing construction in 40R overlay districts may be developed as a matter of right, so long as it accords with zoning, although it may be subject to limited design review. While it seems possible that there might be an opportunity to provide for acceptable new high-density housing development somewhere in Milton under the 40R program, the essential first step is for the town to identify what sort of new development that it wants and where it wants it to be built. Planners need to visualize and present thoughtful development concepts and possibilities, and to employ significant community outreach and public involvement to identify what a majority of residents would find to be acceptable. Only after identification of what would be acceptable development should the question of how zoning should be written to enable such development be addressed. The proposal to secure a consultant to produce zoning before determination is made as to what should be zoned and how it should be zoned makes no sense.
Thank you. Ms. Tagayas, you're recognized. I think you have a presentation for us on the Master Plan Implementation Committee as well, don't you? That would be fine.
Good evening, Cheryl Tagayas, Precinct 9, Chair of the Planning Board and Chair of the Master Plan Implementation Committee. On this proposed amendment, I would urge a no vote. The Planning Board took up our budget some time ago, I guess when all other boards and departments did, and we requested the $50,000 for studies in part because the East Milton Neighborhood Association had come to us and asked us to be proactive. They had felt some frustration that they were looking for more leadership on a planning side and looked to the planning board to help with studies for East Milton Square, in large part due to development pressure that may be coming. The planning board and the Master Plan Implementation Committee kind of commingled funds in the last fiscal year, but we ran out of funds 6 months into this fiscal year, and that was to look at Milton Village and East Milton Square in terms of zoning. Part of the interest that people have in looking at zoning is, can we sustain more development? Do our roads and infrastructure allow it? And we need outside expertise to help us understand and answer those questions. And so for us to make some progress, whether it be a 40R district, which Mr. Whiteside referenced, or whether it be a mixed-use overlay, or whether it be changes to the underlying commercial district. And in fact, there's a lot of the boundary of the district in East Milton is something that probably should be looked at too, because there are businesses that exist by special permit or variance that are outside of the business district, and they're in the residential district. And so for these reasons, the planning board has made this request. at a master plan implementation committee meeting where our budget was discussed, and Selectwoman Katie Conlon, who's the Select Board's member on that committee, said the MPIC budget was unaffected in the budget cuts that many other departments and boards took. And she asked our committee to consider reduction. And our committee felt it appropriate to do so. We had some discussion about the traffic, that it's earmarked, those funds are earmarked particularly for traffic, and it would give us less flexibility to use those funds for something other than traffic that could help us answer some of those planning questions. And so when she and I spoke over the weekend, I said it's unfortunate, but we didn't think that the planning board would need a meeting before town meeting because we have no zoning articles. So she and I spoke, and I think that based on our conversations at both the planning board meeting and the MPIC meetings that led to our budget request, I'm comfortable with the recommendations that are in the green sheet, and we're very uncomfortable with zero lining our studies for the planning board.
Mr. Geist, did you want to give your presentation on the? Well, I figure you're talking about the committee itself. Now would be an appropriate time.
All right. Some of you are new town meeting members, so some of this is repetitive. So the town updated our master plan. It hadn't been updated in decades, over a couple-year process several years ago. And then this town meeting decided and agreed that it was important that the master plan not collect dust on a shelf, and that there be an implementation committee to make sure that the recommendations were followed through. So our committee is composed of myself, Katie Conlon, Dick Burke, Liz Miller, and Tabor Keeley. We meet monthly, and everyone's welcome to come. Next. There have been some great accomplishments. I'm not going to go through the list. There's a portion of the town website for the master plan. You'll find the documents themselves and all of the reports and studies that have been in the works. Some of these are responsibility of different departments and different committees, but we like to put them in the aggregate here so we can see what the hard work of our employed and volunteer members of our community are accomplishing. Next. One of the large initiatives that the committee has undertaken is a study of Milton Landing, which is our waterfront. Small as it is, attractive and historic. And the things that the master plan committee, when the plan was developed, heard was we should increase public access to this wonderful town amenity. So that's 2 years ago, we undertook an initiative to do studies here. Next. We invested in planning, both land side and water side. Water side became more technical and engineering oriented, and those studies are still in the works. The committee had a joint meeting with the select board and the Parks Commissioners in January, and officially turned over our recommendations to the select board for further consideration and hopefully follow through. Next. So, well, this is the waterfront in a very diagrammatic form. I think we'll just keep going on this. There's different users, they're kind of cross users, there's some inefficiencies. And what we wanted to do was make this convenient for multiple users so that we can have people who need a high dock and people who need a low dock, make it more convenient for crew, kayak users as well as boaters. Also people who are interested in green space, watching the birds, listening to the ducks, and how we make it something which is an extension of the park next to it and the farmer's market nearby. Next. We've also been looking at mixed-use overlay zoning. We've been about 1.5 years into this. One of the things that the master plan recommended was doing studies of each of our commercial districts so that they might become more vibrant. that we might have a little more economic development out of them, and that we might use them to address some of our housing diversity challenges. So back to put your housing over the shop kind of idea, that you don't necessarily need to segregate those uses. So that red line is the boundary of our business district in this area. So it's the Milton Village Business District. They're all of our business districts, though, are under one district. So the zoning that's in Milton Village is the same zoning that's in East Milton Square, for example. So an overlay could address unique characteristics of this district as compared to East Milton, which has quite a bit different character and challenges. Next. Thank you, Richard. I mentioned process. So there's a lot of work. There's a lot of things posted on the website. We're continuing to meet about this. If you have interest in delving into the details, we welcome you to attend, and we can go through this with you. Last summer, the planning board held a meeting. There were some issues raised that the committee felt were important issues related to, well, do you know what the zoning would net in terms of a build out? And do you know that the neighborhood can sustain it, that the roads can sustain it? Next. So we used some of those funds from the MPIC funding from last fiscal year to have a consultant do a build-out analysis of the zoning that they had drafted. Based on that build-out analysis, we had a traffic consultant do a second traffic study of this part of town. We've been looking at the zoning ourselves since then. We've had small group meetings with interested parties to run through what the zoning does. Zoning is complicated, as we've learned here at town meeting. We've also had a walking tour with the Historical Commission and meetings with specific neighbors. We are continuing to do our analysis, looking probably at some point this year to turn it over to the planning board for consideration. Next. So some of the things that we're looking to do as a committee in the next fiscal year, as I mentioned, the Milton Village, I mentioned East Milton Square, also this, what we call the Civic Center. That's the area around Town Hall where the new fire station is being contemplated. That's a real mixed-use area. We have most of our civic buildings there outside of our schools. We have our town hall, we have our police station nearby, we have the library, and we also have child care centers, churches, and the Council on Aging. So how do all these work together? And can we work with the Fire Station Building Committee to consider all of these users as they're planning the new fire station? The townwide, well, a design review committee is something that's been suggested because zoning doesn't necessarily address adequately design components, so this is something we'd like to look at. And then the townwide traffic study. Traffic comes up at every one of our meetings, whether it's a 2-lot subdivision or a 50-some lot cluster development like Wolcott Woods. We can only ask project developers to fund traffic studies related to their projects. This allows the town to look at things comprehensively, take the work in East Milton Square. I think there's 3 or 4 separate contracts. Nobody puts them all together and looks at the impact of one on the other. How do we know whether we can sustain new development if we don't do our traffic analysis? So the reduction here, I think, would be fine. We can get started and we can continue our work in the next fiscal year. And then lastly, housing options. I think we all know that the housing affordability continues to be a challenge, and both the Planning Board and the Master Plan Implementation Committee would like to continue to think about how we can improve that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to the motion to amend? Mr. Furse?
Hi there, Brian Furs, Precinct 10. I rise to speak in opposition to the motion. Tonight, our meeting started with a pretty significant indictment of our current fiscal policy in this town and where it's left us. And I think that in order to find a way out of the financial situation we're in, we need to think differently. I used to work for a company that had an award every year for finding a better way. And I would argue that we need to do the same thing in this town, whether we're talking about a pilot program or salary reductions or figuring out a way to think about zoning and permitting a little bit differently so that people want to invest in our town. There are not many companies that want to invest in Milton today. It's just too hard to invest in our town. And if we want to figure out a different way to do it, then I think we need to invest in working with professionals that can help our volunteers figure that out. I don't think a $50,000 investment to solve a problem that could to come up with a solution that could potentially add hundreds of thousands of dollars annually to our budget is probably a pretty good investment. So I encourage us all to find a better way and to invest in our future. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Tagayas.
The most important thing I forgot to do when I started was to thank Brian Furs for his 5 years of service on the planning board. And to welcome Kathleen O'Donnell, our newest member. Thank you.
I'll move to a vote on the motion to amend. All in favor of the motion to amend, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The motion fails. We're back to Article 14. Anyone wish to speak to Article 14 itself? Seeing none. All in favor of Article 14, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. Article 15, you have a green sheet. The same copied flyer here. Recommended that the town appropriate the amount shown in the following tabulation under the heading Recommended FY20. Public Works General has been changed to $1,872,775. Subtotal Public Works $2,492,221. Subtotal Solid Waste $1,946,900. And the change now to total Public Works is $4,439,211. And that to meet said appropriation, the sum of $4,439,211 be raised from the tax levy. Of the total amount appropriated, the maximum sum authorized for salaries and wages is $1,149,333. The Public Works Department is hereby authorized to sell at a private or public sale with the approval of the Select Board equipment that is no longer needed by the department. It is further authorized to exchange or trade in old equipment for similar materials in the usual course of its operations to provide for replacement items. Does anyone wish to speak to this article? Seeing none, all in favor of Article 15? Yes, please. By the way, if you have a question while I'm reading, please make your way down and I'll be able to spot you. Yes, please.
Annie Davis, Precinct 2. Just a question on the refuse disposal and curbside recycling. The explanation in the warrant is extremely helpful, so thank you. But my question is this. Is the figure based on a pre-established contract, or if we, the citizens, were able to reduce our refuse and recycling, would the amount be less?
That's clear. Mr. Berkeley, can you answer that?
Hi everyone, Chase Berkeley, Director of Public Works again. So the figures for FY20 budget for the solid waste are anticipated amounts, they're not contractual values. All the solid waste contracts are expiring on June 30th of this year, and we're in the process of securing new contracts. I will advise this body that you should anticipate much higher costs. We are realizing a very significant discount for the past 5 years because of a unique situation that our current vendor had excess manpower and equipment, and that discount is ending. So please anticipate solid waste costs to be significant. Unfortunately, we do not have exact figures at this time.
But I think your question was, it's on a contractual basis, not a variable amount based on what they pick up. That's what you're getting at. I think in this
So
case.
it's both. So refuse disposal is a contractual amount based on the tonnage that we dispose. Curbside recycling includes the hauling and the disposal or processing. So it's a yes and a no for those two.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak to this Article 15? Yes, ma'am, you're waiting for a question down in front?
No,
Yes.
I was moving for Chris.
Oh, okay. All right, seeing none, all in favor of Article 15, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. Article 16. Recommended, and by the way, this was one that was pulled from the consent agenda, so we will address it. Recommended that the town appropriate $6,373,151 for the Water Enterprise Fund, and that $550,000 be included in appropriation from the general fund for indirect costs and be allocated to the Water Enterprise Fund for funding, and that the sum of $6,923,151 be raised and appropriated as follows. Total water enterprise revenue, $6,923,151. Subtotal direct costs of the water enterprise costs, $6,373,151. Indirect, $550,000. Total, $6,923,151. Yes, Mr. Neely.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Rick Neely, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 3. And the reason I'm standing here is to raise some questions about these rates and the numbers that are in the book here. So what caught my attention as I looked at this was that the revenue that's projected here to increase from $800,000 to $858,000 is about a 7% increase in the revenue that is going to be raised through setting the rates. That's not a good number. That's a high number. When you look back at the 18 numbers and try to analyze what's been going on in this, it turns out that what is listed here is the actual 18 numbers were printed last year's book as the actual 17 numbers. So there's a distortion here as you even try to study this. The headline, though, is that the revenue is going up 7%. That's your rate increase that is looking to be projected for this year. And I think the key point here is I think we need to ask the Select Board, when it's looking at its capital budget requirements that feed into this, to look at the impact on rates when they're approving capital budget items, because some of this reflects past approvals on the capital budget items in the last several years. It's not just the MWRA. If you look at the MWRA piece, it's just a piece of it, and it's not the majority of it. That's the standard answer over the years, is that the MWRA has been the problem. The MWRA, as you can see, on the water enterprise is only going up $70,000, and yet your rates are going up nearly $400,000. So I think the Select Board on this one and in the other ones we're going to get to need to look at the time we're setting the capital budgets, we need to say what is going to be the impact on our rate increases, because the residents need to be prepared for that, and the board should have a policy as to whether it's going to seek annual increases of 7 or 8% every year. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak to this article? Seeing none, all in favor of Article 16, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. Article 17, submitted by the Select Board. Recommended that the town appropriate $7,811,498 for the Sewer Enterprise Fund, that $600,000 be included in appropriations from the General Fund for indirect costs and be allocated to the Sewer Enterprise Fund for funding, and that $8,411,498 be raised and appropriated as follows. Sewer enterprise revenue total $8,411,898. Sewer enterprise costs subtotal direct $7,811,498. Indirect $600. Total $8,411,498. Mr. Neely.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This is a similar case. Rick Neely, Town Meeting Member Precinct 3. If you look at your rate, the user rates that are going to be asked from each of you as a resident, the revenues are going up over $600,000. You can see that from $7,371,000 to $7,996,000. That's about an 8% increase. Again, if you look down at the MWRA, out of that increase, you can see the MWRA is about $235,000 of that increase. The rest of it is self-inflicted increases for local operations, as capital increases. Again, I would request that this is another one of the enterprise funds that the board needs to think about back in the fall when they're setting the capital budget and looking at the other costs that are going to be passed on through this particular rate program. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak to Article 17?
Mr. Moderator, just one further correction again. Again, the numbers here for 18 are all the 17 numbers that are in last year's warrant.
The misprint, thank you. Yes, Mr. Coyle?
My name is
Up to the mic,
Coyle,
there you go.
Precinct 7. I have a question. Can we get an explanation of why has the debt service in this article got up so much? Should I ask the same question on the previous article? I mean, there's a huge increase there. It's not just the MWRA fees. There's something else happening there, I think, that this body needs to hear about. I mean, I could guess it's that the aging system and the cost of all these repairs are just a cumulative effect there. And if that trend continues, we're going to have some very serious problems here on just keeping up with the aging systems that are, a lot of them are 100 years old, 100 more than that, water and sewer. So I think it's something we need to look at and plan for.
Thank you, Mr. Coyle. We'll let the Select Board come up with an answer for you.
We're working on it. It's not a 5-cent answer.
Mr.
We're going to let Mr. Berkeley respond to this. It's a prolonged, it's a multi-year answer over, it's called cluster bonding. We'll let Chase answer it for you.
Okay, so in terms of debt service on the enterprise funds, there's capital work, which is replacing pipes and appurtenances, and then there's equipment that we buy, trucks and other equipment needed. So we use the MWRA's local assistance borrowing to borrow all the enterprise funds whenever available. So it's 0% interest, and a lot of times there's grant money. So the MWRA releases that money in equal amounts over a 10-year period, but we don't necessarily borrow it all each year because the amounts released are not enough to cover a typical project. So what you often have happen is 2 or 3 years worth of appropriations get borrowed in 1 year, and that impacts the debt service. So it does create peaks and valleys as far as the debt service value. But I think what you're also seeing in this particular year is a large bonding for capital work, and then we did authorize equipment purchases last year at annual town meeting, and they all hit in the same year. And just a note on the rates, just to refresh everyone's memory, so the FY18 water and sewer rates were held at 0%, the FY19 were 1.2%, and we'll be approaching those rate increases for this year. So there has been lower rate increases in the past 2 years than are typical.
Do you have a follow-up, Mr. Coyle?
Yes, I have sort of a follow-up question. Does the aging system, we have a lot of pipes that are 100 years old, 120 years old. Some have been replaced recently. There's been a flurry of activity, which is good, but what is it that has not happened yet? Is this going to keep going, and we're going to have a lot more debt service here in the next few years that we need to anticipate, and something that the Warren Committee needs to know about now so they can plan for next year?
Mr. Berkeley?
Yes, so we have capital improvement plans for the water system, in particular, that lays out a 10-year pipe replacement strategy, so we can anticipate how much work would be ideal. we typically can't afford what we should replace, so we try to maximize our replacement and utilize trenchless technologies and certain ways of rehabilitating those older pipes and to keep the costs at a minimum. But what you're seeing and what you're describing is a result of a year that a lot of things were bonded in.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak to this article? Seeing none, all in favor of Article 17, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. Article 18, recommended that the town appropriate the sum of $773,127 for the Stormwater Enterprise Fund, that $85,000 be included in appropriations from the General Fund for indirect costs and be allocated to the Stormwater Enterprise Fund for funding, and that $858,127 be raised and appropriated as follows. Stormwater Enterprise total revenue $858,127. Stormwater Enterprise cost direct $773,127, indirect $85,000, total $858,127. Does anyone wish to speak to this article? Mr. Neely.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Rick Neely, Town Meeting Member Precinct 3. This one is up 7% on the rate revenue. And again, the increase is not as bad as it looks from 18 because 18 is really 17. So again, the issue is I think the board has to have on its policies, like what level of rate increases are we going to have in this program over the next few years on a multi-year planning or financial forecast. Thank you.
Does anyone wish to speak to Article 18? Seeing none, all in favor of Article 18, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. Article 19, recommended that the sum of $755,342 be appropriated for the purposes set forth in this article, that to meet said appropriations, the treasurer be authorized to issue with the approval of the select board bonds or secured notes in the amount of $755,342, and that the town vote to accept grants under the provisions of MGL Chapter 90 in the amount of $755,342. The said reimbursements from the state 100% to be restored upon their receipt to the town treasurer. Anyone wish to speak to this article? Yes, ma'am.
Hi.
Ms. Cronin.
I'm Marina Manning Cronin, Precinct 4. I'm not opposed to the article, but I am opposed to the fact that the streets are not listed. Traditionally, we've always listed the streets. It's the only paper trail we have of what streets are included in the Chapter 90 funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Berkeley.
So the list is short enough, I'll just read it. So the 2019 proposed paving schedule is Adams Street, Alvin Avenue, Brackett Street, Bunton Street, Cedar Terrace Street, Eaton Street, Emerson, Howard, Johnson, Rockwell Place, Washington Street, and Victory Avenue. Only the piece that Milton owns will be paid for by Milton, and Quincy will reimburse us for their portion of Victory.
Did you actually say we're going to pay Howard and Johnson this year?
I did.
You did, thank you. Thought I heard that. Anyone wish to speak to this article? Yes, Mr. Mullen.
Peter Mullen, Precinct 2. As I understand what the recommendation does, we're going to appropriate $755,000 by means of a bond issue. I think I'm correct that we're also going to get a state grant in an equal amount. So I think in total, we're going to have somewhere around 1.5 or 1.6 million to spend on roads. I think if you go anywhere in this town and look at the conditions of the roads, you'll find them atrocious, and the potholes are just bad. I understand what the DPW director has just told us as to what he plans to do this year, but I wonder if somebody either in DPW or somewhere else can advise us how much money we actually need to maintain these roads, and do we have any way that we can come up with that kind of money?
Thank you. Mr. Berkeley? You might swap seats. Unless she likes, the exercise.
Okay, so the town recently completed a pavement inventory, which the study is posted on the town's website if you'd like to look at it. what it does is it rates every single street and segments them into different categories and gives it a numerical score, 0 to 100, 100 being perfect and 0 being the worst. So the town's overall rating, we'll just use an elementary scale, was a 70 in 2011 when the previous pavement study was performed, and the most recent one has it at a 67. So we have degraded slightly. As far as an overall cost of what it would take to kind of bring us up to speed, that's about a $20 million price tag if we were to perform all of the requested maintenance that the inventory found. So our paving budget for the last few years has been $1.6 million. 600,000 of that is reimbursable through the state's Chapter 90 program, and the Capital Committee and Warrant Committee and Select Board has provided an additional $1 million to that in recent times, but obviously there's more work to do.
Thank you.
And thank you for those funds, by the way.
Does anyone else wish to speak to this Article 19? Seeing none, this requires a, sorry, yes. Who would like to speak?
Hi, Amy Dexter, Town Accountant. I'd just like to clarify one point. It is not 755,000 times 2. It's a total appropriation of 755,342,000 in this article. The reason why there's a bond authorization is because it is a reimbursable grant. So in the event that it's in a deficit at year end, we may need to take out short-term notes just to temporarily get us through.
Okay. Anyone else wish to speak to this article? This article requires a 2/3 vote. All in favor of Article 19, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. Article 20, recommended that the sum of $596,700 be appropriated for the purpose of financing the rehabilitation, replacement, or enhancement of the town's water system, including costs incidental and related thereto. That to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the select board, is authorized to borrow $596,700 under and pursuant to Chapter 44, Section 8.5 of the general laws as amended, or any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the town therefore, and that in accordance with Chapter 44, Section 20 of the general laws, the premium received by the town upon the sale of any bonds or notes thereunder, less any such premium applied to the payment of the costs of issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to pay project costs, and the amount borrowed for each such project shall be reduced by the amount of any such premium so applied, and that the select board and hereby is authorized to accept and expend, in addition to the foregoing appropriation, one or more grants or gifts from the Mass Water Resources Authority or any other public or private funding source. Does anyone wish to speak to this Article 20? This also requires a 2/3 vote. All in favor of Article 20, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. Article 21, recommended that the sum of $310,000 be appropriated for the purposes of financing the rehabilitation, replacement, or enhancement of the town's stormwater system, including costs incidental and related thereto. That to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the select board, is authorized to borrow $220,049 under and pursuant to Chapter 44, Section 7.1 and 8.15 of the general laws as amended, or any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the town therefore, and that in accordance with the Chapter 44, Section 20 of the general laws, the premium received by the town upon the sale of any such bonds or notes thereunder, less any such premium applied to the payment of the cost of issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to pay project costs, and the amount borrowed for each such project shall be reduced by the amount of any such premium so applied. And that the sum of $89,951 be appropriated from the August 2018 Stormwater Enterprise Fund bond premium, and that the select board be and hereby is authorized to accept and expend, in addition to the foregoing appropriation, one or more grants or gifts from any other public or private funding source. Does anyone wish to speak to Article 21? Seeing none, this requires a 2/3 vote. All in favor of Article 21, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. Article 22, we covered in the consent agenda. Article 23, recommended that the town appropriate the amount shown in the following tabulation under the heading recommended FY20, total Board of Health, $212,473, and that to meet said appropriation, the sum of $212,473 be raised from the tax levy. Does anyone wish to speak to this article? Seeing none, all in favor of Article 23, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. Article 24, there's another green sheet. Back to the same handout. Recommended that the town appropriate the amount shown in the following tabulation under the heading Recommended FY20. You'll see under Library Salaries and Wages, that is now $1,094,443. Total Library, $1,489,947. And that to meet said appropriation, the sum of $1,489,947 be raised from the tax levy. Does anyone wish to speak to this article? Seeing none, all in favor of Article 24, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. I think, was that a no? Nope, it's unanimous. Article 25. To see what sum of money the town appropriate the amount shown in the following tabulation under the heading Recommended FY20 Cemetery. Total cemetery, $845,344. And to meet said appropriation, the sum of $845,344 be raised from the tax levy. The department is hereby authorized to sell or exchange old equipment to furnish additional funds for new equipment. Someone did pull this out of the consent agenda, I believe. Who would like to speak to this article that did pull it out? Come on. Come on. You gotta fess up. Okay. No crying wolf on the moderator here. All right, Article 25. All in favor of Article 25, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The motion is unanimous. Article 26, recommended that the town authorize the continued use of the Park and Rec revolving fund pursuant to the provisions of Chapter 18 of the general bylaws of the town, and that the town appropriate the amounts shown in the following tabulation under the heading Recommended FY20. Total Parks and Recreation, $568,188, and that to meet said appropriation, the sum of $568,188 be raised from the tax levy. I believe this was also pulled from the consent agenda. Who would like to speak to this article? Mr. Mullen.
Peter Mullen, Precinct 2. I didn't actually pull this from the consent agenda, but in looking at it, if you look at general expenses, the actual appropriation in 2018 was $250,000. The proposed recommended is $144,000. Can someone tell us why the difference, why that change? And it would appear that salaries and wages are up about $40,000. Can somebody explain that to us?
Yes. Parks Commission? Ma'am, if you're answering the question, if you could come to the mic.
My buddy Scott's going to come here and answer these questions with me.
Scott McKay, Precinct 2 town meeting member and also on the Board of Park Commissioners. I believe, and Amy, please confirm this, that there was an issue with a classification on a capital item that is also showing up in fiscal year, let me put my glasses on here, fiscal year 18, that $250,000. I don't know to the extent of what that was. But that was not actually a general expense. It should have been reclassified into a one-time capital expense, and I believe it was for money for the playground planners, a portion of that money. And to answer your question about salaries, it's actually, it nets to about $40,000. It's an increase for our program manager who is getting reclassified from 53D revolving fund account to the general fund, and also to counteract that, there's a certain amount of money for our seasonal employees that's getting reclassified to being paid out of one of the revolving accounts.
Thank you. Mr. Mahalchik, you wish to speak to this article?
Mike Mahalchik, Precinct 7, Secretary of the East Milton Neighborhood Association.
I think I heard someone say, Mike, raise your hand for that consent agenda, yeah, yanking this thing. I didn't raise my hand in time, but luckily 5 people did. And I just wanted to raise the point about the stairs. I think this is what this is about. If you're on Granite Place heading down to Andrews Field, there's some very historic stairs there that are dangerous now. And I'm not going to guess where we're going to get the money to fix these things, or how we're going to do it, but I hope that the park department work on that problem.
Thank you.
Yes, point taken.
Ms.
And
Ma'am, would you just remember to introduce yourself?
Oh, Regina Malley, Precinct 8, also Park Commissioner. We did have a resident in just last week. I believe it was Andrew Diamato from the neighborhood there, and we did talk about the stairs. We're looking into getting quotes to just kind of repair them, but also to replace, but replace would be extremely expensive. But we are looking into it. A few people had suggested, well, take the stairs out and just, grass it. I don't think we're going to do that. We've talked to a lot of the neighbors. That's not what we want to do. It's a nice walking path for people, so.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Ms. Martin.
Genevieve Martland, Precinct 4. I just was also looking for an update at what we call the pond at Kelly Field. If there's a process where we might not have a pond at Kelly Field, I don't know if that's on. But I'm happy to answer the
Yeah, please, Ms. Malley.
We've had a very rainy year, or April, but the sun came out today, so that's good. So we are looking, we did have Childscapes, which is the company that installed the playgrounds at Kelly Field. They did put in some type of a dry well that was supposed to help with the flooding problem. It hasn't, so we're going back and forth with them as to what we paid for. And what we got. But we also are working with our foreman. I just emailed with him today about doing something that's more sustainable. We definitely know it's a problem. I went down there last Saturday, took some pictures. It's atrocious. So we are working on it, again, getting quotes and things like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak to this article? Seeing none, all in favor of Article 26, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. Article 27, we have a green sheet. Article 27, recommended that the town appropriate the amounts shown in the following tabulation under the heading recommended FY20. Total schools, $51,028,200. And that to meet said appropriations, the sum of $50,888,200 be raised from the tax levy, and $140,000 be appropriated from funds certified by the Department of Revenue as free cash. The school department has a presentation tonight at the pleasure of the body.
Sheila Varela, Chair of the Milton School Committee and Town Meeting Member, Precinct 8. In a moment, our School Superintendent, Mary Gormley, and Assistant Superintendent of Business, Dr. Glenn Pavlicek, will give a brief presentation on our 2019-2020 school budget. But I did want to note that we were not able to add several new positions we feel are needed to continue to move our district forward, and especially in the light of our current enrollment crisis. As has been stated in many of our recent space forums and at February town meeting, we are currently educating our pre-K through 5 student body, whose current numbers are equivalent to running 5 elementary schools within the confines of the 4 we currently have. We have had to eliminate 1 full-time position and 4 part-time teaching positions, as well as reduce our club and activity offerings at the high school for the 2019 and 2020 school year. As was stated earlier, the operational override we passed 2 years ago should have maintained our current personnel, but unforeseen circumstances and constraints that have occurred in the town's budget development process have led us to these unfortunate decisions. Needless to say, it's been a challenging year, and I do want to thank the members of our Finance Subcommittee who meet every week, our Chair, Dr. Elaine Craighead, and members Margaret Eberhardt and Elizabeth White, along with our superintendents, for the tireless amounts of hours they have put in to tweaking and finalizing the budget that we will vote on tonight. As was stated earlier as well, I would like to thank the members of the newly formed Finance Subcommittee of the Select Board, headed by members Katie Conlon and Melinda Collins. We worked diligently with this subcommittee, our town administrator, and town accountant to come to an agreed upon number for our school district, given the restraints of our overall town finances. The Milton School Committee asks for a yes vote on this year's budget and also asks for this body's continued advocacy and support with regard to our future space and curriculum needs of our district. And before I turn the mic over to Superintendents Gormley and Pawelczyk, I just would briefly like to recognize two members of our school team. I'd ask for the moderator's patience on this. First, I want to recognize Dr. Kevin Donahue for serving as chair of our school committee for the past 2 years. The board can't thank you enough for your strong, even-tempered leadership and overall guidance to the board and the school district. And we are also very grateful that you have 2 years left with us to continue to bring your knowledge and talents to the committee. And lastly, the school committee wants to recognize our Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Human Resources, Janet Sheehan. Janet will be retiring at the end of this school year after 39 years in education. 10 of those years serving our district as both a teacher, principal, and finally as our assistant superintendent. We want to thank you for sharing your talent and educational gifts with our district, your knowledge of curriculum, eye for teacher talent, and implementation of educational initiatives greatly enhanced our district. And your overall leadership will sorely be missed. We wish you only the best in your retirement and all of your future endeavors. Thank you so much.
Mr. Pawelczyk? Ms. Gormley.
Good evening, Moderator Hiss, Warrant Committee, Select Board, and town meeting members. We're often asked when we go out in public with the school budget, how is the school budget developed? The central office staff meets with the Finance Subcommittee and reports back on almost a weekly basis to our school principals who work with our teachers and our site councils. Those site councils have parents on them and teachers. So this is a collaborative effort. So tonight we're going to give you a brief presentation of our Milton Public School fiscal year 2020 school budget.
This slide, just quickly, in one slide tries to indicate that what most people know, the vast majority of our budget is spent on instruction, special education, instructional services. 3/4 of our budget goes directly to instruction. The part of it that goes to leadership is actually quite small. This is a slide that people have seen before, just to bring up again, how has the budget grown over time? And you can see that for the last 10 years or so, most categories of our budget have stayed relatively constant. It's that blue one at the top, instruction, and the red one in the middle, special education, that really drive the budget for the Milton Public Schools. They are the driving forces in our growth over the last decade. This is also a slide we've talked about in the past. Where is our enrollment going? K-5 enrollment, as you can see, has gone up 26% in the last 10 years. We're looking, the NASDAQ projection had us at 143 students within 3 years in just the elementary schools, reaching 2,382 students in that time. We got a new projection today. Actually, it's within 10 of those numbers, so that hasn't changed. So we are looking at almost 2,400 students in the elementary schools within 3 years. They were built for about 1,800.
So the statement earlier that we're running 5 schools in 4 is pretty accurate in terms of where we are. That bubble is going to, it's not a bubble, that trend is going to go upwards. Grade 6 enrollment has gone up, but is expected to jump another 10% as those children move up into the middle school by fiscal 25, so in another 5 years. And then as they progress up into the high school, we're looking at a 21% increase in 10 years. These are the NASDAQ figures from last fall, and as I say, we just got a new collection of those figures today, and they are very similar to this. They're off by 10 or 15 over 10-year projections, so really a negligible change in their projections for our enrollment.
Our fiscal year 2000 school budget proposal, the school committee's proposed budget for the fiscal year 2000 represents an increase of $2,383,150 over the current FY19 budget as follows. $1.38 million for salary increases of existing staff, that was funded. $293,000 for additional staffing based on increasing enrollment, that was partially funded. $150,000 for 2 new special education support positions, not funded, and $556,000 in non-personnel spending, $486,000 of which is special education, primarily out of district tuitions and transportation that we've spoken to you before, partially funded. I'm going to detail 2 of those areas. The enrollment-based staffing needs. We requested 2 additional elementary classroom teachers. We're rolling off, and that was funded. We're rolling off 15 fifth grades, but our kindergarten enrollment is, as of today, requiring, with 23 children in every full-day kindergarten, 17 full-day kindergarten classrooms. And at 2 of our schools, those kindergarten classrooms are capped. So if you move into the neighborhood, you'll be going to one of the other 2 elementary schools. So that was funded, those 2 classroom teachers. We requested 2 high school classroom teachers based on enrollment at the high school. That was not funded. We requested 1 additional recess aide at each of the elementary schools as enrollment goes up. These lunch recess aides, the number has stayed the same. At the Collycock Cunningham, there could be 250 children out during one of these recess periods after lunch. Going on to the second bullet, 2 new programs were not funded. We requested a middle school special education language-based program. We have students that are at costly out-of-district placements. Our new pupil personnel director evaluated all of the programs, went over the studies that we've had done of our special ed program, and suggested this program would long-term bring back students to the Milton Public Schools and respond to the needs of current students in our district. And we've also requested over the last 3 years a high school transition program. There are 110 districts in the Commonwealth that have these programs at the high school for children who are out in concussions, children who have medical needs, children who have mental health issues. Returning back to school full-time does not set them up for success. They have to be transitioned, and these transition, they're called BRIGHT programs, are proven to be able to, again, in the end, set up these students for success. Those programs are not going to be funded. The budget cuts. Now we're going to positions that are actually in the Milton Public Schools that have to be reduced. We're going to eliminate 1 elementary technology teacher. This position was funded by the override. It will leave 1 technology teacher at the elementary level. So 1 teacher who's an expert in technology starting at grade 3. 3rd graders take those MCAS exams online, going right up through high school. So 1 of the 2 elementary technology teachers will be eliminated. At the middle school, the principal proposed to take 5 positions, but through the increased funding that you've heard of tonight, we're able to reduce it to 4. And these are full-time teachers who will leave the Milton Public Schools, and the positions will be posted at part-time and filled in the area of technology, STEM, writing, and art electives. The other impact of these reductions is more children, more students will be in the other electives, and enrollment will increase. A loss of funding for 1/3 or more of the high school clubs and activities, again, to eliminate cutting, reducing a teacher in the classroom. This was the principal's recommendation, and again, we go through Finance Subcommittee and to the school committee. And lastly, a reorganization of part-time administrative support position, a cutback. You heard detailed earlier this evening that we received word of increased $40,000 in funding to the school budget as of this morning. The Finance Subcommittee will meet and recommend to the school committee, and part one of the reductions or cuts on this page, or perhaps part of two different reductions, will be replaced. But those actual teachers have been contacted that their position is being eliminated or reduced.
Again, quickly, the summary of a budget request for this year, the number we're calling out is the one in red on the right. As you can see, the majority of our costs run up by the special education population, 7.5% increase this year. A lot of that has to do with out-of-district placements between, and again, the need for that middle school literacy program for language-based students, because we have currently 58 students who are out of district. The cost is running $5 million a year for tuition, plus another $1 million for transportation. If we can bring some number of those students back in at $100,000+ apiece, it's money well spent on a teacher or two. So that's part of the reason for the request for the last several years, and just trying to visualize it there. The current requested budget was just over $52 million. As of tonight on the green sheet, we are getting a $980,000 reduction from that, as the superintendent mentioned. Friday, we knew about $15,000 of the increased money, and that's why one of the middle school replacements was made from 5 cuts to 4. The other $40,000 that we received word of this morning has yet to be determined by the school's finance subcommittee, but some portion of those cuts that were on the prior page will be restored. However, to restore the cuts of that prior page, it's well over $200,000. So $40,000, while good, will make a dent, but no one should think that it's going to solve the issue of the cuts on that prior slide. And finally, just going back to our enrollment, a couple of the emerging needs. Based on the NESDEC study, we will need 6 more elementary teachers within 3 years. We did 2 this year. We're looking at the need to add 2 more a year, just simply for the number of students who are enrolling in the district. As those numbers roll up to the middle school, we'll need more middle school teachers within the next 4 years. And as we move up to the high school, we will need more high school teachers within the next 7 to 10 years. So all of these are on the horizon.
Ms. Gormley-Pavlicek, if you could wrap up in a minute or so.
2 slides.
2 slides, okay.
Again, the school district responds to the students in front of us, and we respond to state and federal mandates very briefly. At every presentation, we mention emerging needs, a special education preschool coordinator. I won't detail this. This will be on the web tomorrow, but we have a growing preschool population of children with special needs that, as of the time they're 3 years old, have to be provided with special ed services. This is going to eventually require a coordinator. In the studies that have been done by external sources and experts of our special ed program, the growing special ed program is going to require eventually an assistant director for special education. Again, this will be on the web tomorrow.
And all those kids will need buses. So this is on the horizon as well.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Friedman-Hannah, you recognized?
Karen Friedman-Hannah, Precinct 2. So it saddens me that we are not fully funding our schools terribly. My kids had the benefit of having what they needed as they went through, and truth be told, my daughter is a teacher in the schools now, which I'm very proud of, and it's a wonderful thing. And those cuts really do make tremendous difference for the classrooms and for the specialists and for everybody involved when there is not enough, when there aren't enough opportunities to have the kids in different electives and different things. Not only do they not have their passions fueled by what they love, but it's not a great experience in any way because they can't get the full benefit by having so many kids in it. The point I was raising, though, coming up is when people in the town vote to support an override, which we luckily frequently do, especially for the schools, people have the understanding generally that that's going to continually fund the schools, when in fact it doesn't after the first year of the override. And most people, even though this body gets that because we vote on these things, these budgets, and we know that the money goes back into basically the general fund and it gets reallocated, most of the town doesn't understand it when they vote for overrides, that it's not continuing to support what they are voting for it to support. That's a flawed thing to me. I don't understand why we can't come up with a way that when an override is voted in for supporting the schools or supporting the fire department or supporting the police department, whatever services it's being voted in, that lasts for more than a year. It seems like it should be that it lasts for 3 years, that people have an understanding that what they're trying to support will actually go to supporting what they think they're paying for. And I don't know, I know that's a complicated thing, but there's got to be a better way than how it's done, because it's really not fair to have the thought that we're supporting one thing and then it goes into a more general use. Not to say that anything in our town isn't important. I totally get it. All the services in our town are important. But the schools are the to me, most important thing, and the services like fire and police right behind it. And we need to be supporting that fully, not having it be diminished every year where we have to be fighting tooth and nail to be getting what's really needed to keep the education process in our town top-notch. I just think there has to be a better way and that we need to figure that out. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Kristen Lacasse, Precinct 1. I'd like to stand and advocate for the transitions program at Milton High School. If you don't know what it is, Google it and learn about it, because if you need it, you're going to need it more than you've ever needed anything in your life, okay? There's no better village than Milton High School to catch your child. Hands down in the world. You have to fund it so they can do their job and they can help your children. So please, whatever money you find, wherever you get it, fund the transitions program at Milton High School.
Yes, ma'am.
Tricia Heelan, Precinct 6. I just had a question on the student activities. I'm really concerned about those being reduced in the clubs and activities. What I tell everybody about the high school is that there's something for everyone, and I'm really concerned about that. I know the fees were reduced with the previous override. I was just curious if that could be increased so that we don't have the reduction, or if that can't happen because it was reduced in the override.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Elaine Craighead, school committee member, chair of the finance subcommittee, and returning town member from precinct 4. The $40,000 needs to be discussed in finance subcommittee and voted on a recommendation to send to the full school committee. But one of our priorities for that money is to restore at least some of the clubs and activities that were cut in the cuts that you saw presented. Does that answer your question? Pardon me? Oh, no, we're not increasing the fees, as far as I know. That's not my decision to make, but we haven't discussed touching the fees because we just lowered them in the last override, so.
Okay, thank you. Sir?
My name's John Cohane, Precinct 7. I'm a new town meeting member. And I think one of the things that makes this town great are our schools. And all the problems, budget problems that we have will only be exacerbated if we don't have great schools. I have a daughter and 2 grandsons who just moved here. That might affect my decision a little bit, but I still don't, I really think the schools, I know and I appreciate all the other departments that made sacrifices, but I really need to say I think the schools are it, and I'm 100% behind you.
Does anyone else wish to speak to this article? Seeing none, all in favor of Article 27, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. Article 28, recommended that the town appropriate the amount shown in the following tabulation under the heading recommended FY20, Blue Hills Regional Technical School, total recommended $799,946, and that to meet said appropriation, the sum of $799,946 be raised from the tax levy. Does anyone wish to speak to this article? Seeing none, all in favor of Article 28, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. Article 29, recommended that the town appropriate $40,000 to be expended by the school building committee established pursuant to the vote of February 2019 special town meeting under Article 6 for the purpose of further study of the base needs of the Milton Public Schools and potential solutions that may be undertaken, and that to meet said appropriation, the sum of $40,000 be appropriated from funds certified by the Department of Revenue as free cash, and further to authorize the select board, the school committee, and the school building committee to apply for grants, gifts, or donations for the purposes of this article from federal, state, or private sources, and to authorize the select board to accept such grants, gifts, or donations on behalf of the town. Does anyone wish to speak to this article? Seeing none, all in favor of Article 29, please say up. We have, yes, Mr. Clark.
Dan Clark, Precinct 10, town meeting member. I just had one point of clarification that probably come from the school committee is, I read this and it says that they want to establish a further study, but there was recently a recommendation that the building committee go forward with building a new elementary school. So I was just trying to understand the difference between this language and what the school committee voted on.
Okay, Ms. Varela?
Sheila Verla, Chair of the School Committee. So we had to submit the article before we just voted on the charge, what our charge and our charge/recommendation would be to the School Building Committee last week. And we had to get this into the warrant because it had to go to press before then. So that's why the language is a little bit more vague. But basically the $40,000 would be for the newly constructed School Building Committee to start their work, you know, to find out how we fund, where we put, what we can do for a new K-5 school. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak to this article? All in favor of Article 29, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The motion carries. Article 30, recommended that the town appropriate the amount shown in the following tabulation under the heading recommended FY20, consolidated facilities, total $1,189,399, and that to meet said appropriation, the sum of $1,189,399 be raised from the tax levy. Does anyone wish to speak to this article? Seeing none, all in favor of Article 30, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. Article 31, recommended that the town appropriate the amount shown in the following tabulation under the heading recommended FY20, interest and maturing debt, total $4,760,438, and that to meet said appropriation, the sum of $200,000 be appropriated from funds certified by the Department of Revenue as free cash, the sum of $200,000 be appropriated from funds released by the overlay reserve, and $4,360,438 be raised from the tax levy. Does anyone wish to speak to this article? Seeing none, all in favor of Article 31, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. Article 32, recommended that the town appropriate the amount shown in the following tabulation under the heading recommended FY20, stabilization funds, grand total $610,000, and that to meet said appropriation, $610,000 be appropriated from funds certified by the Department of Revenue as free cash. Does anyone wish to speak to this article? Yes, Mr. Wells.
Good evening, Richard Wells, Chair of the Select Board. This was the article, you get a lot of things put in front of me when you were sitting at this table, so this is what was put in front of me. Back to Mr. Collins' concern, in this article, we've put aside $500,000 towards the fire station building project. And hopefully, perhaps we can do the same thing next year. There's no guarantee with free cash, but to Mr. Collins' question, this would put us halfway there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker.
Leroy Walker, Precinct 10, Town Meeting Member. Just to ask the chair a question, the language in the warrant says contingencies such as the Fire Station Building Committee. So I think that the discussion as to what it would be allocated for is when we vote to take it out of the stabilization fund, not when we put it in. It could also be used for school building committee or school building expenses. But the point is that the language says contingencies such as.
Thank you, Mr. Wells.
I did ask that question, Mr. Walker, and our intent would be to, as I previously described, I mean, emergencies can happen, anything can happen, but our intent would be to put this $500,000 towards the Fire Station Building Committee. But you're correct, the language was written as such. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak to this article? Seeing none, all in favor of Article 32, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. Article 33, recommended that the town vote to appropriate the sum of $50,000 for the purposes set forth in this article, and to meet said appropriation, the sum of $50,000 be appropriated from funds certified by the Department of Revenue as free cash. Does anyone wish to speak to 33? Mr. Mullen.
Peter Mullen, Precinct 2. I asked that this be taken out of the consent agenda because I think it's important for people to focus on what this liability is. This is primarily health care costs for retirees of the town. If you look at the comment, the estimate of our current liability is $132 million. And the comment says that we have a little over $1 million in the trust fund. And we're appropriating $50,000 towards that liability. That's not sustainable. You can't get to $132 million that way. I don't know if anybody in town government can tell us anything about what else we might be able to do, but it doesn't sound like this is sustainable.
Thank you, Mr. Mullen. Yes, Mr. Neely, while the Select Board is considering Mr. Mullen's question. Are you ready, Mr. Wells? No, not yet. Okay.
Mr. Moderator, Rick Neely, Town Meeting Member Precinct 3. The plan on this was that previously was the chairman of the Pension Study Committee back in the 1980s. We were at 0% funding on the pension. We are now somewhere in the high 70s, low 80s. The plan, if everybody remembers it, is to use the funds that are being used to reach 100% on the pension plan to be redirected upon completion of the funding for the liability on this OPEB fund. So if you read earlier on the contributory retirement fund, it was describing that the plan was moved out to 2028. So the additional funding that is being used to reach that 100% after 2028, based upon the warrant tonight, beginning in 2028, would be then switched over to fund this liability. So I just hope everyone remembers that in 10 years. Thank you. Thank you.
We'll invite you back, Mr. Neely. Yes, Mr. Wells.
Mr. Neely's correct, except it is 2025, not 2028. So 2025, the pension liability should be fully funded, and then we should move that over to cover this at that time.
Does anyone else wish to speak to this article? All in favor of Article 33, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. Article 34 was addressed in our consent agenda. Article 35 has a green sheet. By the way, we'll just check with the body. We're approaching 10:30. Keep going. Thought you might say that. It is actually a pink sheet. Everyone have their pink sheet. Recommended that the town continue the revolving funds created under Chapter 44, Section 53E and a half of the Mass General Laws and established by votes of the annual town meeting as indicated in the tabulation below. Park Commissioners, $100,000. Library Trustees, $65,000. Select Board, $1,000. Board of Health, $30,000. Library Trustees, $25,000. Cemetery Department, $60,000. Conservation Commission, $15,000. Select Board, $25,000. Consolidated Facilities, $10,000. And the change in this is Planning Board and Select Board, $50,000. Sorry, I need a language. And recommended that the town continue the revolving funds created under Chapter 44, Section 53E and a half of the Mass General Laws. I think we all covered about that. Yep, all set. Okay, that's Article 35. Anyone wish to speak to this article? Yes, ma'am, Mr. Gaius.
Cheryl Tagayas, Chair of the Planning Board. I just want to let folks know we've had discussions about the Traffic Mitigation Fund and the Wolcott Woods project, which the Planning Board issued a special permit for last week, will be our first contribution to this fund in an amount of $27,000.
Does anyone wish to speak to this article? All in favor of Article 35, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. Article 36. Recommended that the town vote to accept the provisions of Section 44, Section 53F and 3/4 of the Mass General Laws, which would authorize the town to establish a separate revenue account to be known as the PEG Access and Cable Related Fund, into which may be deposited funds received in connection with a franchise agreement between a cable operator and the town. Effective July 1, 2019, monies in said fund shall only be appropriated for cable-related purposes consistent with the franchise agreement, including but not limited to Section I, support of public, educational, or governmental access cable television services. Section II, monitoring compliance of the cable operator and the franchise agreement. III, preparation for renewal of the franchise license, and further, that the town transfer to said fund the balance as of June 30, 2019 in the RNC/Comcast License FCC Fund, currently held by the town for the purposes of PEG access and cable operations. And further, to appropriate from said PEG access and cable related fund the sum of $482,000 for fiscal year 2020 expenses of the said fund. Does anyone wish to speak to this article? Seeing none, all in favor of Article 36, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion is unanimous. Article 37 has a green sheet. Literally a green sheet, the last one of the green sheets. Recommended that the town vote to appropriate the sum of $15,000 to the Affordable Housing Trust, and that to meet said appropriation, the sum of $15,000 be appropriated from the Hendry's Building Demolition Fund. Does anyone wish to speak to this article? Seeing none, all in favor of Article 37, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. Article 38. Recommended that the town vote to authorize the Select Board to file a petition with the General Court to substantially the following form, provided that the general court may reasonably vary the form and substance of the requested legislation within the scope of the general public objectives of the petition. An act authorizing certain investments by the treasurer of the town of Milton, be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives in general court assembled, and by the authority of the same as follows. Section 1. Notwithstanding Section 54 of Chapter 44 of the general laws or any other general or special law to the contrary, the treasurer of the town of Milton may invest trust funds that are in the custody of the treasurer in securities that are listed on the Standard & Poor's 100, in parentheses, the S&P 100. Section 2, this act shall take effect upon its passage. Does anyone wish to speak to this article? Yes, Mr. Kelly, I believe. Yes?
The article states that the treasurer could invest any of the securities in the Standard & Poor 100. Does that mean that the treasurer could invest in one of those companies, which would not be a very diversified portfolio? So perhaps we could limit the investment into something such as a Standard & Poor 100 index fund that would spread the risk over a multiple number of securities. In the warrant, they do mention that these are pretty stable funds, companies, but you got to understand that General Electric is one of those Standard & Poor 100 companies, and we've seen what has happened to GE. So I just am concerned that it could be a little more risky than, I know the last 10 years, the market has been strong, but many more people think we're in the 8th inning of the ball game, and we might not continue this kind of robust growth. So therefore, I think that, especially at this time, taking that additional risk may not be prudent. But if we are going to do it, that I think that to limit the investment to an index, maybe an ETF index of the Standard & Poor 100 would be a more prudent idea.
Would you like to just ask a question as opposed
Yes,
to a
I'd like
motion
to.
amend? Just a
I'd like to
question.
recommend an amendment to change where he can invest the securities to be more specific and make it a Standard & Poor 100 index ETF or mutual fund.
Okay, is there a second? There's a second. Okay, we have a motion to amend. Can I make sure the clerk, the warrant committee clerk has the exact language? You have it? No. Mr. Kelly, could you just get the language to be precise? Mr. McAuliffe, would you like to explain?
Jim McAuliffe, Town Treasurer, Precinct 7. We can already invest in stocks. It's called the legal list. GE is on the legal list. That's the reason why I want to get towards the S&P 100. The stocks, there was a white page up there. The 27 stocks in the legal list right now, most of them are drug companies and banks and GE. We're just looking to diversify a little bit more using the S&P 100. It's a little safer because we can get to different sectors. So we're not looking to add a ton of stocks. My job is not to lose the money, and that's what I intend on doing. Right now we're rolling T-bills and we're laddering CDs. We only have 7% in stocks right now, and I don't plan on going much higher at this point because the market is oversold right now. Thank you.
So, Mr. Kelly? Yes?
Well, if the body is confident that the treasurer can handle this, it will be diversified and be prudent, then I'll withdraw the amendment.
Very good. Thank you, sir. No? Yes, Mr. Chinman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Michael Chinman, Precinct 2. This struck me as strange to have a reference to the S&P 100 index in our bylaws. And I did a Google search of the opening words of the proposed special statute, notwithstanding Section 54 of Chapter 44, just those words. And it makes no sense for us to propose a special statute to the legislature if the legislature is not going to approve it. And the legislature, we're not the first town to do this because the existing bundle of investments that the treasurer can invest in is really stupid. It's limited. I've heard it to 22. I've heard 23. I think the treasurer just said something else about 27 stocks that can be invested in, which is ridiculously small. It's not safe. Diversification is good, and there's not diversification possible when the number of stocks you can pick from is in the 20s. This would expand it, yes, to 100 possible stocks, which is better, but you know, if you do the Google search for notwithstanding Section 54 of Chapter 44, you see that this has been done before. And for example, the city of Peabody in 2014, it's the same language, the exact same language as our proposed special statute language, notwithstanding Section 54, Chapter 44, blah, blah, blah. The treasurer of the city of Peabody may invest trust funds that are in the custody of the treasurer, and here's the change, in accordance with Chapter 203C of the general laws. So who else did this? Well, by special statute, the treasurer of the Mohawk Trail Regional School District was allowed to invest the scholarship trust funds in the custody of the treasurer in accordance with Chapter 203C of the general laws. In 2006, the town of Brookline got a special statute. Same language as the one we're proposing, but instead of the Standard & Poor's 100 index, it says that the funds of the town in the custody of the treasurer can be invested in accordance with, and Brookline limited it a little bit, sections 3, 4, 5, 8, and 9 of Chapter 203C of the general laws. So what's Chapter 203C of the general laws? That chapter, section 1, says it may be known and cited as the Massachusetts Prudent Investor Act. This wheel has been created. Section 2 of that act says that a trustee who invests and manages trust assets shall owe a duty to the beneficiaries of a trust to comply with the prudent investor rule set forth in this chapter. And then the ensuing chapters describe the prudent investor rule regarding diversification, regarding different things. And it would allow the treasurer, following the prudent investor rule, to invest in broader range of securities than those in the S&P 100. It would also allow investment in an index fund, which the previous speaker mentioned. An index fund is, it's not only safer, more diversified, and cheaper. There isn't an investment advisor getting a commission, or not much of one, on an index fund investment, but it also outperforms over time what stock advisors pick for individual stocks. They don't outperform the index. So you get cheaper, better performance, and it's safer, it's more diversified. You know, if the Dow tanks, everything's going to go down. But you still have to follow the prudent investor rule if you approve the language that the other towns have done, that the legislature has already approved, and I couldn't find an instance where the legislature approved putting the stocks available as defined as the S&P 100. Now, I think the easy solution is for me to move to amend to take out the reference to securities that are listed on the Standard & Poor's 100 index and put in the language that the other towns and the school and the legislature has approved by referencing in accordance with Chapter 203C of the general laws, which is the Prudent Investor Act. I'm told that the moderator has already perhaps preliminarily ruled that that would be an out-of-bounds amendment. And I would urge you, Mr. Moderator, to change that position. I think this Article 38 clearly put the town on notice that we're going to be expanding or seeking to expand what are the allowable investments from the current 22, 23, 27 to something broader. And I don't think changing the definition of that breadth from the S&P 100 to the Prudent Investor Act in Chapter 203C is out of bounds. So if it's not out of bounds, Mr. Moderator, I would like to make that amendment. If you deem it is out of bounds, I would urge this body to not vote in favor of this proposal, but instead let's get a proposal that follows what the legislature has already done repeatedly, that is safer, better, and cheaper than what's proposed here.
Mr. Chinman, could I just make sure I understand the exact language you're looking for, if you have that written down?
Mr. Moderator?
Yes, please, Mr. McCullough.
This language is verbatim Peabody's. We took this from the city of Peabody. The other people that have approved this over the years, Brookline 2006, Newton 2007, Northampton 2008, Sterling 2013, Peabody 2014, Cohasset just adopted the 203C last week at their town meeting. This is going, the law you pass is the prudent investor rule. What you do with the S&P 100, you put it in your investment policy, just like we have right now, the legal list. So that the S&P 100 doesn't go to legislature, the prudent investor rule does, and that's what they vote on.
I'm sorry, I hate to disagree, but it's, the language in the act is what goes to the legislature. It doesn't change from what we're voting on. And it says, listed on the Standard & Poor's 100 index. And I have Peabody, I have Brookline, I have those special statutes right in front of me.
This is Peabody's
And
language.
Mr. McAuliffe, hang on. Why don't you take a moment, just write out the exact language so that we can see if members want to second what your proposal is. So the members can know what they might be discussing.
While we're in a TV timeout, I asked Mr. Moderator if I could speak. Richard Wells, Chair of the Select Board. Mr. Cronin, you were right. We're going to be done in one night. I didn't believe you when I walked in the door tonight, but your wisdom is prevailing. On behalf of our board, we just want to thank the Warrant Committee for all of their hard work, everything they did this year. We started with a 2-point-something plus million. It was a lot to bring it together. Thank them all. They put in hundreds of hours. You know, every time that you come to this meeting, you realize that we're a community that's about people, and the commonality amongst all of us is that we all make our homes in this community. So we also want to thank all the other boards and committees, the school committee, the planning committee, the Board of Health, the Town Government Study Committee, I can't name them all, the assessors, all of you who do so much to make Milton the community that it is. It's not easy to have the quality of life that we have here all the time, and it's not always perfect, but for the most part, Milton is a truly special place. And the last person I want to thank tonight is someone who's been with us for 30 years, and this is his 30th anniversary, who's been the guiding force, not just for our board, but for so many elected officials in this town for so long, and that's our town council, John Flynn. John will be retiring in July, and this is his final town meeting, so well-deserved. Thank you. I'm not talking anymore tonight.
Hi, folks. Mr. Chairman was kind enough to write out his language, and I'll just describe what he's getting at and my opinion on it. So he wants to strike all the language in Section 1 following custody of the treasurer and just substitute one sentence that says, in accordance with Chapter 203C of the general laws. So in effect, what that is doing is adopting some language that has been adopted by other towns, referring to this prudent investor rule, and it gives the treasurer some more authority. My concern is, in the warrant, and I think I've mentioned this a number of times, the warrant is literally a warning to the citizens that something is going to happen. And one of the things we as town meeting are bound by is the concept of staying within the scope of what was written. And so in my opinion, I've conferred with town council, and they agree that this would expand the scope beyond the S&P 100 stocks that we warned the citizens about into something that may be valid, but is bigger than they were warned about. So I would like to rule this proposed motion out of scope. Yes.
Follow up on that, Mr. Moderator?
Please.
In light of that ruling, I urge this body to reject this amendment. We can come back in October and get the language that's better, safer, and cheaper. It doesn't make sense to keep going back to the legislature seeking a special statute with this incremental change from the current stock picking, and then later get the better language. Let's just do it once, and we can do it in October. So I urge a no vote on this article.
Thank you, sir. Sir, you're next.
Hi, my name's John Tarvin, Precinct 2. I urge you to vote in favor of Article 38 as written. I think it gives the treasurer some flexibility, and I trust his professional expertise to make the right decisions and manage our money soundly. I think similarly to the way we would not tell our school superintendent how to manage the special education classrooms. I think this is in the purview of our treasurer, who we're paying for his professionalism. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Walker, I think you're next.
Leroy Walker, town meeting member, Precinct 10. So I'm a little confused because both the intent of the current language and the intent of the prudent investor rule, it seems to me, have the same objective, which is to ensure that two things. One, that the investments are in appropriate vehicles, and second, that as the treasurer said, they do their best not to lose any money. Of course, no one intends to lose money in the stock market, but a lot of people do. But the point is that if the treasurer also agrees that Chapter 203 is part of the spirit of this amendment, which I think is what Jim said, then I don't see, one, why he couldn't accept that language as a friendly amendment, and two, why simply expanding the number of stocks would take the language out of scope. I'm not understanding that logic, but you say that's the opinion of town council. So I would offer two options. One, I'd ask the treasurer to accept Mr. Chinman's language as a friendly amendment. You might say that's out of scope, Mr. Moderator.
I will. Yes.
But then in that case, I would agree with Mr. Chinman that since the treasurer also seems to agree that the Chapter 203 language is within the spirit of this language and is consistent with what other towns who have adopted this have done, then I would, as Mr. Chinman has done, urge that the body vote no on this current language and that we take this up again in October. Thank you.
Ms. Hodlin?
Christine Hodlin, Precinct 2, Library Trustee. I worked with the library trustees and the board several years ago to move our trust funds to be managed by an outside investment manager, Bartholomew. They are a company that manages money for a majority of the municipalities in Massachusetts, and they have been working with many of the other treasurers across the state and other investment managers to try to move forward exactly the wording that Mr. Timlin proposed, which is the prudent investor law. The current list of places that we can invest our money is extremely limited, and we pay this investment management company to invest our funds in a prudent way, and also to follow what we would like to have for the library. So I actually agree with Mr. Chinman, and I would urge you to vote no against this. The library would like to have this list be the prudent investment, and we've been looking to try to make this happen soon. So I urge your no vote on this as well, and that we look at it to expand it further. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak to Article 38? Seeing none, yes. Mr. McCullough. By the way, for the body, you may have seen me push tonight. I think since town meeting has already gone through 4 nights of town meeting in this fiscal year, I was hoping we could keep it to 5 for the entire fiscal year, so thank you for your indulgence. This is what we call filler in the business.
Hi, Linda Lee Sheridan, Precinct 9, in the spirit of filling airtime. When the school committee did their wonderful presentation tonight, at the very beginning you saw a picture that said Unified Sports. And it's a new program that they have at the high school this year that is really exciting. It's a track program. It builds on the success of our Challenger program that we've had for a few years with baseball. And the Unified Sports Program is for high school students with intellectual disabilities, as well as general ed population high school students who are interested in participating in a track. The Unified Sports is run by the Special Olympics, and it's a pretty amazing opportunity to, I'm just a huge fan, to see true spirit of sportsmanship and love and compassion. So we have our final track meet of the year this Thursday, and since we're not going to be at town meeting, maybe you can all come. And it starts at 3:30 at the high school football field. 3 o'clock. This one starts early at 3 o'clock. Thank you for that correction, Kathy Fagan. So 3 o'clock at the high school track football field. I think this one is against Weymouth Hingham. It's against another school, and you're gonna just be moved to tears. I have been for every meet that I've gone to. So if you're around Thursday afternoon at 3, please come by. We need fans in the stands. That's what Unified Sports calls it, fans in the stands. So please come out. Thank you.
Mr. Wells, you're recognized.
Yes, given all the discussion, we're going to withdraw this article and bring it back in October.
Technically, Mr. Wells, I'll entertain that as a motion to refer back to the select board.
Yes.
Is there a second? I'm assuming there's no discussion. All in favor of referring Article 38 back to the Select Board, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The article carries. We're Article 39. Recommended that the town vote to extend the term of the Town Bylaw Review Committee for 2 years through November 3rd, 2021, and to delete the following text from the vote of the 2015 Annual Town Meeting under Article 43, which authorized the town moderator to appoint the Town Bylaw Review Committee, quote, with the exception of Chapter 10, known as the Zoning Bylaw, Chapter 13, known as the Personnel Bylaw, Chapter 15, known as the Wetlands Bylaw, and Chapter 21, known as the Stormwater Management Bylaw. Mr. Mullen, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Peter Mullen, Precinct 2, and Chairman of the Town Bylaw Review Committee. It's seldom good to be the last person between people getting out of a meeting. Essentially, the Town Bylaw Review Committee was created in 2000 by this body in 2015 to review the town's bylaws. And I don't believe the bylaws have been reviewed since approximately 1938. It's prohibited by the bylaws to throw coal ash in the street. We're a 5-member committee. We started going through the bylaws. Susan Galvin is very interested in trying to get our bylaws codified. Currently, we don't have current bylaws on our town website. We only have them up through 2007, I believe. We have entered into a contract with a company called General Code, which will codify our bylaws, and we're in that process. This article that's before you tonight does 2 things. One, it extends our term for 2 more years. We don't think we're going to need the full 2 years, but we're scheduled to expire in November of this year, and so we wanted a little more leeway in terms of the time to get this done. The second thing that it does is that when we were created, there were 4 kind of very detailed bylaws that were excluded from our jurisdiction. The zoning bylaw, the personnel bylaw, wetlands, and the conservation bylaw, I think. And essentially, we're asking that those be put back within our jurisdiction. What we envision doing is getting back this proposal from General Code, which will take our current bylaws and put them in a different format, kind of uniform description and sectioning of the bylaw, and then we'll send them to the various boards and departments of the town to see whether or not they want to make any changes to them. So we would urge a yes vote. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak to this article? Seeing none, all in favor of Article 39, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. I'll entertain a motion to dissolve. Oh, Mr. Wells, you have, yep.
I was just sent one more message. This is not me. June 22nd and 23rd, Hutchinson Field, Milton Music Festival. Great community event. Don't miss it. Thank you all. Motion to adjourn.
All in favor of dissolving, please say aye. Opposed, no. Motion's unanimous. Thank you very much, folks.